Well, you are right on time for this live broadcast of the Senate afternoon sitting on this day of the 23rd of February, the year 2023. Good afternoon. This is a live broadcast brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in partnership with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. Lined up for consideration on the floor of the Senate this afternoon is that members will be making a decision on the motion on the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the county government's additional allocations, cash disbursement schedule for financial year 2022-2023. This is a motion by the Chairperson Standing Committee on Finance and Budget, and will be seeking the House to adopt the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the county government's additional allocation cash disbursement schedule for the financial year 2022-2023 that was laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 16th February, and that the Senate approves the county government's additional allocations cash disbursement schedule for the financial year 2022. This debate on this particular motion will be a resumption of a similar debate that was interrupted on the Tuesday of 21st of February 2023. And this afternoon, senators will be making a decision on whether they will be adopting this report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget, or whether they will have reservations about this report. Also lined up for consideration are 4 bills originating from the Senate that will be read for the second time. The County Vocational Education and Training Bill by Senator Moses Kajwang is one of the bills that will be read for the second time. The motion by Senator Gloria Oroba on the provision of free sanitary towels to end period poverty is also lined up for consideration on the floor of the Senate House this afternoon. And the member is seeking to have the Senate push the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action in partnership with the Ministry of Education and Council of Governors to facilitate provision of feminine hygiene products in all public schools. The senator or the mover of this motion is also seeking to have the Senate push the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action in partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Council of Governors to ensure that all schools that do not have bathrooms that facilitate privacy, cleanliness, or proper disposal of hygiene products are properly equipped or be properly equipped. Also create awareness and take advocacy measures on reproductive health issues related to period poverty. The senator also seeks to include in the curriculum a dedicated lesson per week to teach girls on menstrual hygiene. And the final point that the senator seeks to achieve when the Senate resolves to push the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action in partnership with the Ministry of Education and Council of Governors is to ensure that sanitary products will be obtainable timely, consistently, and in a way that respects the dignity of concerned persons. This is a motion by Honorable Senator Gloria Oroba, and it is lined up for consideration on the floor of the Senate this afternoon. Members this afternoon will also be considering a motion by Honorable Senator Mohamed Chute on the institution of measures to curb incessant high electricity costs in Kenya. And according to the mover of this motion, is that aware that energy is an essential factor of production and its total consumption is a major determinant of performance of the economy, with its cost and reliability spurring or stifling economic growth. Again, further aware that there has been a significant growth in the demand for electricity in the country, driven by economic growth and an increased efforts towards rural electrification, while the supply has been constrained due to, among other factors, a number of factors that the mover of this motion has lined up there. So as you can see, the Deputy Speaker of the Senate has entered into the chambers. Honorable Kathure Murungi, I will now hand you over for this live broadcast. My name is Kamche Menza. Good afternoon.
Pray. Almighty God, we beseech you to build with your abundant favor and blessings as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our church. Amen. From where I sit, I can see you have no quorum. That has been confirmed. So I request the bill to be long for 5 minutes.
All right, the Deputy Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Kathure Murungi, has just directed that the quorum bell be rung for 5 minutes to allow members of the Senate who are not yet in the chambers to be able to walk in for the House to attain its requisite number of members required to be in the House for the House business to kick off. So currently is a bell that will be on for 5 minutes, of course, for the members who are yet to get into the chambers to be able to walk in. So a motion on the institution of measures to curb incessant high electricity costs in Kenya by Honorable Senator Mohamed Chute is lined up for consideration on the floor of the Senate this afternoon. And the member will be seeking to have the Senate resolve that a standing committee on energy to undertake an inquiry into contracts signed by IPPS detailing the cost, capacity, and duration of the contractual agreements and their implications on affordability of electricity in the country. Also, the Senate will be required to resolve that the Standing Committee on Energy to undertake an inquiry into discrepancy in the cost of electricity sold to Kenya Power by KenGen, imports from Ethiopia and IPPS, and as well as the diversion of the electricity generated by Lake Turkana wind power to the national grid, bypassing the inadequately supplied northern frontier counties of Marsabit and Samburu. The mover of this motion will also be seeking to have the Senate resolve that the Ministry of Energy comes up with a policy framework that will be aimed at lowering the cost of electricity as a way of addressing the high cost of living, and as well enhancing clean energy by switching to renewable sources of energy such as geothermal power, wind energy, among others, as a way of reducing the carbon footprint. This motion is lined up for consideration this afternoon once the House kicks off its business. Remember, what is happening currently is a quorum bell. The Deputy Speaker of the Senate has ordered that a quorum bell be rung to enable members to get into the chambers. And this is according to the standing orders that when the chair at the time of the beginning of or the commencement of House business, when the number or quorum that is required has not been achieved, then the chair or the speaker at that particular moment may order that the bell be rung for 10 minutes, then later 5 minutes. And if the quorum is not achieved, then the speaker may adjourn the sitting. So currently, as directed by the deputy speaker, is that the bell be rung for 5 minutes, of course, to allow members to get into the chambers. Members of the Senate will also this afternoon, once the House kicks off its business, is that they will be considering a motion by Honorable Senator Wahome Wamatingam and Honorable Senator Mohamed Faki on enhancing highway safety and convenience. This is a motion by the two members, and according to them is that 67% of road crash fatalities and injuries in the country comprises of the economically productive age groups of 15 to 65 years, and that the importance of good post-crash care reduces deaths and disability, and the suffering for road crash survivors creates the urgent need for effective emergency medical care system elements and processes on the highways. Also, the movers of this motion say that further aware that lives and properties are lost or irreparably damaged daily on major highways in the country due to accidents and explosion of fuel tankers, and the lack that is the majority party leader, Honorable Aaron Cheruyot, in the House, has just walked in, and the quorum bell is still on. Of course, members are expected to walk into the chambers to enable the House start
Ring
its
again
business.
for 5 minutes,
And once the quorum is achieved,
and majority will approach
then
the chair.
Speaker can call the House to order and begin the business. But the quorum bell is still on. And on this motion by the two senators that talks about enhancing highway safety and convenience, this is a motion by Honorable Senator Wahome Wamatinga and Senator Mohamed Faki. They say that lives and properties are lost on or irreparably damaged daily on major highways in the country due to accidents and explosion of fuel tankers, and the lack of accessible roadside amenities such as medical clinics, rescue centers, fire engines, and ambulances hamper efforts to mitigate the carnage caused by the accidents, rescue lives, and put out fires. They to also say cognizant that setting up safe stopping points for road users at regular intervals with the necessary roadside amenities such as fuel stations, parking spaces, restaurants, telephone booths, minor repair shops, medical facilities, and toilets enhances total travel experience, and the lack of these points make it impractical for drivers to stop as often as they would wish to, resulting into driving-related fatigue, a significant contributor to accidents on the highways. The two members, however, in this particular motion, they will be seeking to have the Senate resolve that the Kenya National Highway Authority, in collaboration with the Council of Governors, to come up with a policy framework on the incorporation of road reserves for roadside amenities in all highway designs. Also, the Ministries of Health, Roads, Transport, and Public Works, in conjunction with the Council of Governors, to undertake a survey to ascertain the specific amenities required but not available on the existing highways, such as satellite medical clinics, fire trucks, and ambulances, and identify the most convenient locations to develop them. Again, the Ministry of Roads and Transport, in conjunction with the Council of Governors, to develop public-private partnerships, guideline on leasing of the road reserves to developers, financing the construction of the amenities and the packaging of incentives to attract investors. Those are just some of the resolutions that the movers of this motion will be seeking to attain. And of course, the Senate to resolve a number of issues, including these three that I have just highlighted. Currently, though, is a quorum bell. Members are yet to walk into the chambers. Remember, according to the standing orders, is that the House requires a requisite number for the House to start its business. Currently, that number has not been achieved, and it is a directive from the Speaker that the bell be rung. The House needs a total of 15 members to be in the chambers to enable it start its business. But before then, what we have now is a quorum bell. I can see Mandera Senator, Honorable Ali Roba there, but members are still expected to get into the chambers if the House business is to. Remember, if the quorum is not achieved, then according to the standing orders, the Speaker can adjourn the House, but hopefully the 15-member quorum will be achieved for the senators or for the House business to kick off this afternoon. The Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill. This is a bill that is originating from the Senate. It is a bill by Honorable Senator Danson Mungatana. Is lined up for second reading. Also, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, a bill originating from the Senate, Bill number 6 of 2022, is also lined up for second reading. The House is still waiting for the quorum to be achieved. We are hopeful that members will be able to walk in. Remember, House business starts at 2:30. It is now 2:45, and the number has not been achieved, but of course we will be waiting for the direction from the Speaker, who is chairing the proceedings of this afternoon, on whether the House will continue with its business or perhaps adjourn due to lack of a quorum. 15 members are required to walk into the chambers or be seated at the commencement of the House. I can see Honorable Senator Samson Cherargei is in the chambers. And of course, the quorum bell is still on. Members are expected to walk in as directed by the Deputy Speaker, who has ordered for the bell to be rung. This is a quorum bell. And the order paper is heavy. There is a lot of business that they will be expected to consider. 4 motions and 4 bills that are lined up for second reading. The Preservation of Human Dignity and Enforcement of Economic and Social Rights Bill, originating from the Senate. This is Senate Bill number 7 of 2022 by Honorable Danson Mungatana, is part of the bills that are lined up for second reading. There is also the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill. This is also by Tana River Senator Honorable Danson Mungatana. These are bills that have been lined up for second reading. And once the House kicks off its business, then these bills will be read for the second time. The Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Bill by Honorable Danson Mungatana seeks to amend the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act 2017 to allow the Speaker of the House of Parliament to designate a member to chair the Committee of Powers and Privileges in his or her absence, and to prescribe categories of members and qualifications that may inform each house in selecting members to serve in the committee. So, as you can see, Senator Cherargei is counting to see whether the number has been achieved, and he is indicating there that 3 more senators are needed to achieve the number, 15 members. If the number will be achieved, then the House business can start, but the quorum bell is still on, and it will be on until the quorum is achieved if the House is to begin its business. And this is according to the standing orders. And once the quorum is achieved, then the members can start. Then members can start the House business. But what we are seeing is that the quorum bell is still on, and members are also yet to take up their seats. The privileges, the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill by Honorable Senator Danson Mungatana is a bill that seeks to ensure that feedback on Parliament's resolutions and reports is not only given, but given in a timely manner, as delays or failure to submit reports undermine the ability of Parliament to undertake its oversight. So the quorum must have been achieved now. As you can see, members are taking up their seats. I will now hand you over for this live broadcast brought to you by PBU in partnership with KBC. Good afternoon.
Administration of oath.
Next order.
Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Next order. Later. Honorable Senators, in the public gallery we have this is a communication concerning visiting teachers and students from Kahawa Garrison Secondary School, Nairobi City County. In the public gallery we have 92 students accompanied by 4 teachers from Kahawa Garrison Secondary School in Nairobi City County, who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. Thank you. Nairobi Senator. Yeah, please do majority rule. Recognize those students.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ningetaka kuchukua fursa hii kuwakaribisha sana wanafunzi kutoka hii kaunti yetu nzuri ya Nairobi. Mumefanya jambo la hekima sana kutembea katika bunge letu la Seneti leo. Tunafurahia kuwa nanyi, na ningetaka kuwaeleza ya kwamba masomo ndio kitu ambacho mzazi anaweza kupa, ambacho hakuna yeyote ambaye anaweza kuchukua kutoka kwako. Mafunzo mnayopewa muyaweke kwa hali inayofaa. Mambo mengi yamekuwa sasa katika teknolojia tofauti. Nazidi kuwaomba muweze kufuata yale wazazi wanawaeleza, yale walimu wanawafunza, muweze kuwa viongozi bora kama pia sisi. Chochote kisije kikaja wafungia ndoto zenyu. Mzidi kuweka bidii katika maisha na mtakuwa bora, kwa sababu hata sisi tulio hapa tulianzia hapo mlipoanzia, na tukaweka ile bidii ambayo inayofaa, na Mungu pia tukamweka mbele, na hapa ndipo tupo leo, na Mungu awabariki sana. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. There are a few requests. I don't know whether it is on the same matter. Senator Ososi. Senator Mahanzo Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure for students to learn from us, to be role modeled by us, and every time we have visitors, we look forward to invite them, to welcome them, and follow the proceedings. I encourage those young children one day to become senators. There's a president of America who became a president because when he was a student, visited the Capitol Hill, and one day the Congress, and one day became the president of America. I wish them very well, and I encourage them to work hard so that one day they can sit here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, next one.
Order number 3, messages.
Next order.
Order number 4, petitions.
Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay on the following paper on the table of the Senate today, the 23rd February 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the report of the Parliament of Kenya delegation to the 145th Assembly and related meetings of the Interparliamentary Union IPU held from 11th to 15th of October 2022 in Kigali, Rwanda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay.
Okay, Vice Chair. Parliamentary Service Commission.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay on the 23rd February 2023 this paper I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate, the annual report of the Parliamentary Service Commission for the financial year 2021-2022. I beg to lay.
Thank you. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Senator Enoch Wambua, you have a motion under your name on drought mitigation program in public schools.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to give notice of motion. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion. Aware that Kenya is experiencing the most intense, severe, and alarming drought in 40 years as a result of the failure of 4 consecutive rain seasons, affecting more than 20 counties in arid and semi-arid lands. Further aware that more than 4.2 million people, representing 24% of the arid and semi-arid lands population, are facing high levels of acute food insecurity, with about 2.7 million in crisis phase and 785,000 people in emergency state, noting that the national and county governments, both local and international development partners, and philanthropists have made attempts to respond to the dire situation occasioned by the severe drought, concerned that thousands of children did not attend school during the 3rd term of the academic year 2022 and beginning of 2023 as a result of the ongoing drought. Now, therefore, the Senate urges, 1, the Ministry of East African Community, the ASOS and Regional Development to develop immediate and long-term interventions to alleviate the ravaging effects of drought and hunger periodically affecting the country and more severely the ASOL areas. 2, the Ministry of Education. And the Speaker, this is important, that the Ministry of Education, in conjunction with the Council of Governors, to establish modalities to ensure no learners are sent away from schools due to lack of school fees, to ensure that children from vulnerable families have access to education. And 3, the Ministry of Education, in conjunction with the Council of Governors, to implement effective school feeding programs to ensure that children from vulnerable families in drought-hit regions have access to at least 1 hot meal per day and that no child misses class due to lack of food. The Speaker, I beg to give the notice of motion.
Next is Senator Kavindu. Senator Agnes Kavindu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to lay my motion before this Senate. Compensation to the Kenyan victims of 1998 bombing of the United States Embassy in Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, I lay to give notice to the following motions. That aware that disaster is defined as an overwhelming event and circumstance that tests the adaptation of response of the community and individuals beyond their capability and leads momentarily to massive disruption of functions for the community and individuals that often exceed their capability to cope with using existing resources. Further aware that such was the case in the 1998 US Embassy bomb disaster in Nairobi, in which many of the Kenyan casualties resulted from the collapse of adjacent building located within a 2 to 3 blocks radius, and with reverberation being felt by most parts of the Nairobi, that resulted to 213 Kenyans and 12 Americans killed and over 500 citizens of both countries being seriously injured. Noting that US allies, including Kenya, have endured a great burden of death and long-term and in many instances, permanent physical and psychological injury. Further noting that the United States government has since compensated some of the victims and families of US citizens, leaving families of Kenyan citizens and certain other victims uncompensated. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 1, advance a friendship with cooperation between the United States and the Kenyan by supporting the eligibility of Kenyan and American victims and their personal representatives, surviving spouses, and next of kin in the Victim Compensation Fund pursuant to the Justice for United States, victims of United States sponsored terrorist acts, and 2, partner with the Ministry of Health and explore subsidized medical treatment for the surviving victims of the bomb blast. Mr. Speaker, sir, this issue.
That's enough for now because you
okay, Mr. Speaker, but this issue has taken 24 years. And so I pray and I plead with you, where you take it, they take it with so seriousness and act on it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. The next is Senator Danson Mugatana. You have a motion. You give notice of your motion on the record of proceedings of the first ordinary session of the 6th Parliament of Pan-African Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that the Senate notes the record of the proceedings of the first ordinary session of the 6th Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament held in Gallagher Convention Center, Midrand, South Africa on the 23rd October to 12th November 2022, laid on the table of the Senate on the
2023
Thursday.
for record purpose.
2023, yes.
Oh, no, 2022. You are
It
right.
should be 2022.
You are right,
Mr.
sorry.
Speaker.
Sorry, Senator Mugatana.
Laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 16th February 2023. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Majority Whip, Senator Boni Karwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to give notice of the following motion. That the Senate notes the report of the parliamentary delegation of Kenya to the 145th Assembly and related meetings of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, held on the 11th to the 15th of October 2022 in Kigali, Rwanda, which was laid on this table of the Senate today on Thursday, 23rd February 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
We have a couple of statements. We start with Senator Professor Tom Odhiambo Jenda, Senator for Kisumu County.
Mr. Speaker,
If my
sir.
record is ready to have 3 statements.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have 3 statements. The first statement is on the misuse of arms by Kenya Wildlife in Kisumu County, KWS.
For NITA work, start with the one on the misuse of firearms.
Misuse of firearms.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise under Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding the misuse of firearms by officers of KWS in Kisumu County. In this statement, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee should, 1, investigate the circumstances leading to the injury of one Byron Ochieng Alango, ID number 395-38206, who was allegedly shot by Kenya Wildlife Service Rangers on 26th December 2022 at Mamboleo Junction in Kisumu County. Secondly, to state the measures put in place to regulate the use of firearms by Kenya Wildlife Service officers in civilian areas in order to prevent misuse of firearms by KWS officers. Thirdly, to investigate the current state of insecurity in Kisumu County estates, stating the nature of insecurity case, perpetrators, and action taken by the security apparatus in Kisumu County. And lastly, to inform the Senate of measures, if any, to compensate victims of excesses by KWS officers and other armed security agencies, as well as preventive measures to avoid future occurrences of misuse of government firearms. Mr. Speaker, that is the first statement.
The second one.
The second statement is on the construction of Koru Soin Dam. Mr. Speaker, sir, I arise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources regarding the status of construction of Koru Soin Dam following the compulsory acquisition by the government of the land for the construction of the said dam several years ago. In the statement, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee should explain the progress made towards the construction of Koru Soin Dam, whose construction was meant to help stem the flood menace often experienced by residents of Nyando in Kisumu County. Secondly, to state whether there is any budgetary allocation towards the construction of the dam in the current financial year, and whether there are plans to prioritize the construction of the said dam. Thirdly, to outline measures put in place by the national government, if any, to compensate the owners of land that was compulsorily acquired for the purposes of construction of the dam, and whether the government and the residents have reached an agreement on the amount of compensation to be paid to landowners, and whether there's a budgetary allocation towards the said compensation of the residents. And lastly, to elucidate the extent to which the people of Kisumu County will benefit from the said project. Mr. Speaker, sir, my last statement is on the threat to human, wildlife, and destruction of farm crops by hippopotamus in the paddy fields of West Kano Irrigation Scheme in Kisumu County, a current menace, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources concerning the threat to human life and destruction of farm crops by hippopotami in the paddy fields of West Kano Irrigation Scheme in Kisumu County. In the statement, the committee should explain measures, if any, put in place by the national government and the county government of Kisumu to prevent the destruction of farm crops in West Kano by hippos, as well as address the threat to human life caused by wild animals. Secondly, to state the assistance extended to farmers and residents of West Kano to enhance their knowledge in dealing with human-wildlife conflict, including fencing their farms as a deterrent measures against the hippos. And lastly, to list all reported cases of human-wildlife conflict occasioned by hippos in West Kano rice fields since 2022 to date, stating the remedial measures taken, including compensation of farmers and families of those killed or maimed by EPOs. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a current problem, and only last week, 2 members of one family were killed by hippopotamus in these rice fields. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. The 3 statements to be considered by the relevant committees. Senator Edwin Sifuna, Nairobi Senator.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health regarding allegations of a plan by the Ministry of Health to restrict unemployed Kenyan health workers from seeking jobs abroad. In the statement, the committee should address the following. Number 1, investigate allegations of the existence of a workforce migration policy by the Ministry of Health through which there are plans or reported plans to restrict qualified unemployed Kenyan health workers from seeking work abroad. Number 2, state whether, in developing the said policy, the Ministry of Health complied with Article 10(2)(b) and C and Article 232(1)(b), D and I of the Constitution with specific reference to equity, social justice, non-discrimination, and involvement of the public during the development of this policy. Number 3, explain the rationale for such a policy, given the state of the Kenyan labor market and in light of the plight of the thousands of qualified but unemployed health workers, stating whether what the ministry is doing to ensure that all qualified but unemployed doctors in the country are being employed expeditiously. And finally, Mr. Speaker, outline the measures that have been put in place by the Ministry of Health, if any, to revise and upgrade the remuneration and healthcare of healthcare practitioners to ensure a fair and conducive working environment. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. What is out of order?
Speaker, I beg to seek further clarification on that statement, with your permission.
Yes, proceed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Senator Sifuna. Could also the statement include a confirmation that the government intends to deny the non-practice allowance that is paid to doctors who work in public hospitals, clinical officers who work in public hospitals, to cushion them from the fact that during the time they are working in public practice, they don't enjoy the opportunity to benefit from their skills by doing private medical practice. Mr. Speaker, because this is a cross-cutting issue, let them just top it up by also confirming that the same non-practicing allowance for judges and magistrates is also going to be scrapped. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I can see several requests on this statement. Majority Leader.
Not on this statement per se. Comments by the Majority Whip. Standing Order number 104. A senator who wishes to speak on any matter in which the senator has pecuniary or proprietary interest shall first declare that interest. Senator Boni Alwale is a practicing gynecologist, Mr. Speaker. While making his comments about this particular topic, I thought it would be in order, Mr. Speaker, to declare publicly that he has a personal interest in this matter, either now or in the future, should the people of Kakamega rethink the endorsement of him being here, Mr. Speaker. So can you put the senator for Kakamega in order, Mr. Speaker, and ask him to properly address this House on that particular matter?
Majority Leader, he should do that because he is, what he said is that the government wants to stop the non-practicing allowance. I don't know whether he is also maybe interested to be paid by the Parliamentary Service Commission. Senator Mboni Karwal and Doctor,
Mr.
Boni
Speaker,
Karwale.
Mr. Speaker, our majority leader is perfectly right. But he should have started by asking me to define what non-practicing allowance is. Non-practicing allowance, Mr. Speaker, is not paid to doctors in private practice. It is paid to doctors in the civil service. Mr. Speaker, I left the civil service when the leader of the majority was in kindergarten. And that is the last time I enjoyed that non-practicing allowance, Mr.
Which
Speaker.
year was that, Senator Boni Karwale? Which year was that?
Mr. Speaker, because of the peculiar interests of the younger members of the fair sex, let me not disclose my age. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is very important so that the country is on the same page. Currently, if a doctor is working in a public hospital, he is paid 35,000 shillings. Clinical officer is paid 20,000 shillings. A judge is paid 20,000 shillings. A magistrate is paid 15,000. This cushions them from the fact that their colleagues make more money from the profession. It cushions them to the extent that they are not attracted to go into private practice at the expense of the poor members of the public who cannot afford our fees, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the part of the judges and magistrates, you can imagine if a judge, because he's looking for money, he was to go and take instructions from a client, and later on in the day, in the fullness of time, the same client appears to him as a judge. So we're supposed to cushion them so that they don't come. There is confusion. People think that the doctors are looking for the 20,000 shillings, 35,000 shillings. 35,000 shillings to a doctor is peanuts. When you carry out one operation, Mr. Speaker, we make, as you know, all of you get our fees, between 50 and 200,000 shillings for an operation of 1 hour. So when we sacrifice, we don't go for those operations and take care of your families. Give us the 35,000 shillings so that we can buy some little presents for our children, and in my case, my grandchildren, Mr. Speaker.
You want to make a comment on the statement? Now 2 minutes each, if any comment to the statement. The time you take from your seat to the dispatch box is 30 seconds.
My comment is only 1 minute, Mr. Speaker. Mine is just further clarification. I know that we need to know, Mr. Speaker, why that direction was given where doctors are not allowed to travel. Number two, the number of doctors in the country that are supposed or have qualified, yet they are not employed in the country. And finally, Mr. Speaker, you remember there was a collaboration between county governments and the famous Cuban doctors. So what is the position? Because I thought there was also a collaboration where the Cuban doctors were working within our county hospitals, and then at that time the Ministry of Labor started a collaboration with the British government on how they were taking nurses to the Britain to continue and work there. So if those clarifications can be clarified, Mr. Speaker, then we shall be able to put that matter to rest. Thank you.
Senator Ososi, is it on this? You know, your account has been on for quite some time, so I'm getting confused.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak to the next matter, but
let me give now another. You want to speak still?
Yeah, I can speak on this matter.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I think I must thank my colleague here, the senator for Nairobi, for bringing up this matter, because most of us were shocked to read in the media that over 4,000 doctors are unemployed, and yet the government has spent a lot of resources to train these doctors, and these doctors are not allowed to seek jobs elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, this is a serious issue, considering the shortage of medical staff in our hospitals. We cannot be having doctors who are trained, not able to work or not able to travel. It is really a serious matter. So I think the statement by Senator Sifuna should be taken seriously by the Committee of Health and a report brought to this House so that we discuss this matter, because this is a matter of national concern, and it is going to discourage young people from taking serious courses like medicine, which require a lot of concentration, a lot of investment, and then after the course, you end up not getting the job or not being able to travel out of the country. I think that is a draconian rule by this government, which the Committee of Health must seek to ensure that that rule is stopped henceforth. Mr. Speaker, allow me to also comment on the statements that we give in this House. I am concerned that every time we come to this House, members are requesting an average of about 5 to 6 statements a day. But committees are not moving with speed to process these statements. Mr. Speaker, I did my statements, my 2 statements, last year. To date, I am waiting for the first communication from the committee to tell me when they are inviting the relevant people to come and respond to the issues. So yes, we are giving out, making requests, but the committees should work aggressively so that these statements are responded to in time. And Mr. Speaker, you know you are the chair of the liaison committee. You need to call your members to order and ensure that our contribution in this House in terms of requests for statement is not in vain.
Thank you, Senator Ososi. Senator David Wakoli.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Ningependa kuchangia kwa yale ambayo mwenzangu Senator wa Nairobi ametaja, kwamba kwa usanjari huo kuhusiana na mkataba wa madaktari na mishahara yao ni kinaya na kejeli kwamba serikali ina mkataba na wahudumu madaktari kutoka Cuba ambao kwa mwezi mmoja daktari mmoja anatukamua sisi wa Kenya milioni 1 kwa mwezi. Ili hali madaktari wenye tajriba kama hiyo Kenya humu hawana kazi, wanapiga miayo na hawaruhusiwi kutafuta kazi katika nchi za kigeni. Ninaomba hivi, itawezekana kwamba hawa wa Cuba warudishwe kwao na hizi pesa wanazolipwa zitumike kuajiri madaktari hapa Kenya? Hoja ya pili, kuna wale madaktari mashinani, kwa kimombo tunawaita CHVs, ambao wanafanya kazi butu, kazi nzito kule mashinani. Itawezekana vile vile wao wawezeshwe kuhusishwa na wapate mishahara ili kunufaisha wa Kenya katika nyanja za mashinani? Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Yes, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, sorry to interrupt the flow of program, but I wish to draw to your attention that we have a very important business on item number 8. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I want to request that this is a long-established tradition of the House that whenever we have such pressing matters, we can pause a debate on any particular matter, dispense off with it. It's only one vote that we are taking. This should not ordinarily take us more than 5 minutes. We send this money to our counties and we revert back to the order that was going on. With your permission, Mr. Speaker.
If honorable senators could minimize request to make comments on the statements. Then we can leave the following, maybe 3 or 4 statements, then we clear. Honorable Senators, we have our visiting teachers and students from Sabis International School, Nairobi City County. In the public gallery, we have 22 students accompanied by 8 teachers from Sabis International School in Nairobi City County who are in the Senate on an education tour. In our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. Thank you. On this one, let us give, there is a request from Senator Tabitha Mutinda. Just 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why it's a special request? These are children from the Sabis International School in Runda. These are my good, very kids who requested to come to this house. I want to ask you to continue pursuing your educational goals. As I always say, education is the only thing that your parent can always give you, and that is what somebody can never take away from you. I wish you the best. I know you are in one of the best schools in this country. Do not take advantage because you get what maybe your parents can be able to provide. I'll also urge you to continue visiting other schools that might not have the facilities that you have, so that you're able to understand what this country offers. You are our future leaders. As here we are, we've walked an education journey. I urge you, I request you, I humbly ask you to shine in your education. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator for Nairobi County.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Probably for the benefit of the students in the gallery, the Nairobi delegation is quite healthy. We have 1 elected senator in Nairobi, but we have at least 5 nominated senators who come from the Nairobi county, and therefore they form part of the delegation. Senator Mutinda, who spoke before me, is one of the members of the delegation in Nairobi. So if she has taken the opportunity to welcome you, please consider that to be the same position that I will take in welcoming you to this house. I hope that you can learn something from your tour today, and that you are proud of the representation you have in the Senate, especially for your teachers, those who voted for me. I want to say thank you very much, and enjoy your time here in the Senate. Asante sana.
Yes, Senator Kajwang, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, is Senator Sifuna in order to purport that Sabis International School Runda lies in Nairobi County when the boundaries are so clear that Sabis lies in Kiambu County? And Mr. Speaker, I say this with authority because that is my neighborhood. And Mr. Speaker, in as much as I want to say I live in Nairobi, in as much as I want to say I live in Nairobi, the reality is that I live in Kiambu. So the senator who should be inviting the ladies and gentlemen from Sabis, Mr. Speaker, should be the senator for Kiambu, not the senator for Nairobi. And the senator for Nairobi should know where he gets his votes from. Beyond Githogoro, Mr. Speaker, Senator Sifuna has no further votes. After Githogoro, the votes are for Kiambu.
Senator Kajwang, now that we know those are your neighbors, kindly now welcome them on behalf of the senator for, for Kiambu, who is not in the house.
Mr. Speaker, as a resident of Kiambu County, I'd like to welcome the delegation from Sabis International School Runda. Mr. Speaker, it's a school that I'm very well familiar with because I've previously taken my son there for an interview. And Mr. Speaker, in as much as he was admitted to join Sabis, we were just not able to afford the fees. So that tells you how how a choice of school it is. But Mr. Speaker, I am extremely and immensely proud of the students from Sabis who I see in my neighborhood and who are friends of my children, and even the staff of Sabis. Mr. Speaker, even the entrepreneurs, because before coming to this house, I was in the financial services sector, and I was in a group of company where Centum was part of it. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the entrepreneurs who partnered to bring this world-class school to Kenya, to bring it to Kiambu County, and I do believe we tend to ask ourselves, Mr. Speaker, actually, if you do a poll in here, and you ask yourself who went to an international school, you keep asking yourself, where do they usually end up? Mr. Speaker, I know you went to some rural DEB school, primary and secondary. Mr. Speaker, the senator for Uasin Gishu must have gone to some local school barefoot. So I want to encourage the children at service that the job that we do is not a dirty job. It is a job that you can do having come through an international school. And we need more enlightened and woke people in this house, and I hope that many of you or some of you will find their way into this house. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, the Senate for Kisumu County has approached the chair that somehow he thinks that some of his children are in this house, in the gallery. Or you still also, you live?
Mr. Speaker, I have 3 children in Sabi school. 3. So I think these are classmates. Yes, from one mother. So let me just welcome. I have Chrissy, I have Ruby, I have the little one. So welcome to the House, to Senate. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I think it is important at every point that when students visit Senate, they need to understand the bicameral nature of Parliament. They need to understand that it is important that at any point in learning, the lower levels and the higher levels, that they must aspire for the best. And that there's only room at the top. And when they come to the top at there now, you're actually physically at the top, aspire to remain there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, as requested by the majority leader and the leadership of the House, there are a few other statements that I'm maybe suspending for a few minutes. We first dispense off with the business appearing in order number 8 on the order paper, and then we'll come back to the statements, and then we proceed in that manner. Thank you.
Order number 8, motion, adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the county government's additional allocations cash disbursement schedule for the financial year 2022-2023. Division.
Division bill to belong for 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay, now lock the doors and then you draw the bar. Honorable Senators, Honorable Senators, I put the question that the Senate adopts the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the county government's additional allocations cash disbursement schedule for the financial year 2022-2023, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 16th February 2023, and that pursuant to Section 17(7) of the Public Finance Management Act and standing under 189(3), the Senate approves the county government's additional allocations cash disbursement schedule for the financial year 2022-2023. Senators, we are voting electronically. Confirm whether the system is okay. Where is our technical team? Can you advise us whether? Okay. Honorable Senators, it's like this system is not working. So we can go the manual way. You can use the local. Yes. Yes, the House leadership can give us, tell us. One each from either side. Senator Chimela. And Senator Eddy. Yes, let's proceed.
Senator Abbas Sheikh Mohammed, Wajir County. Senator Adan Dulo Fatuma, Isiolo County.
Go the vote from Senator Duro. Yes, Senator Duro, let's take your vote again. Wait, just a minute. Mike, wait for the mic.
I vote yes, Mr. Speaker. I can see people are excited.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Senator Cherarke Samson, Nandi County.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the great people of Nandi, I vote yes.
Senator Cheriot Aaron Kipkirui, Kericho County.
Okay, I can use this other one. Mr. Speaker, I vote yes.
Senator Chesang Alan Kiprotich, Trans Nzoia County. Senator Chute Mohammed Said, Marsabit County.
I vote yes.
Senator Ikomwa James Lomenen, Turkana County.
Yeah, Kubali.
No, senators, you have no power to vote on behalf of your colleagues.
Senator Haji Abdul Mohammed, Garissa County. Senator Kajwang Moses Otieno, Homa Bay County.
No.
I'm here. I vote yes.
Senator Kajwang Moses Otieno, Homa Bay County.
I vote yes.
Senator Kamau Joseph Githuku, Lamu County. Senator Kathuri Murungi, Meru County.
I vote yes.
Senator Keroche Tabitha Karanja, Nakuru County. Senator Halwale Boni, Kakamega County.
I vote yes.
Senator Kipkorir William Cheptumo, Baringo County.
I vote yes.
Senator Kisang William Kipkemoi, Elgeyo Marakwet County.
I vote yes.
Senator Lelegwe Steve Tumbesi, Samburu County.
I vote yes.
Senator Manzo Daniel Kitonga, Makueni County.
On behalf of the great people of Makueni, I vote yes.
Senator Madzayo Stewart Mwachiru, Kilifi County.
I vote yes.
Senator Mandago Jackson Kiplagat, Wasingishu County.
Mr. Speaker,
Senator
Sorry, repeat the vote. Senator Mandago.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes.
Senator Methu John Muhia, Nyandarua County.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I vote yes.
Senator Mogeni Eric Okongo, Nyamira County.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes.
Senator Mundigi Alexander, Munyi Embu County. Senator Mungatana Danson Buya, Tana River County.
Tana River votes yes, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Murango James Kamau, Kirinyaga County. Senator Mudhama Agnes Kavindu, Machakos County.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of Machakos people, I vote yes.
Senator Mwaruma Jones Mwashushe, Taita Taveta County.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes.
Senator Mwenda Gataya Mofaya, Tharaka-Nithi County. Senator Mwinyi Haji Mohamed Faki, Mombasa County. Senator Ndiritu John Kinywa, Laikipia County. Senator Ngugi Joe Joseph Nyuto, Murang'a County. Senator Ojienda Odhiambo Tom, Kisumu County.
Mr. Speaker, because the people of Kisumu need these funds, I will vote yes.
Senator Oginga Oburu, Siaya County. Senator Okech Eddie Gicheru.
Minute, let's get the vote from the senior. Give him the mic.
One has come. Okay, Mr. Speaker, sir, Siaya votes yes.
Senator Okech Eddie Gicheru, Migori County.
Mr. Speaker, Migori votes yes.
Senator Okoiti Andrew Mtata, Busia County.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I vote yes.
Senator Olekina Ledama, Narok County.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes to send 110 million shillings to Narok County as additional revenue.
Senator Onyonka Richard Momoina, Kisii County.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the great people of Kisii, I vote yes. And a point of order, Mr. Speaker, my name is Richard Momoima, not Momoina. Momoima. The difference is Momoima means he's the only son, which I am. The other one has no meaning.
Next vote. He has already voted. Next.
Senator Osotsi Godfrey Atieno, Vihiga County.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes.
Senator Recha Julius Murgo, West Pokot County. Senator Roba Ali Ibrahim, Mandera County.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I vote yes.
Senator Seki Lenku Olekanar, Kajiado County.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes.
Senator Sifuna Edwin Watenya, Nairobi County.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes.
Senator Thangwa Paul Karongo, Kiambu County. Senator Wafula David Wakoli, Bungoma County.
Mr. Speaker, kwa niaba ya wazalendo wa kaunti ya Bungoma, napiga ndio.
Senator Wakili Hillary Kiprotich Sigei, Bomet County. Senator Wamatinga Wahome, Nyeri County. Senator Wambua Enoch Kio, Kitui County.
The Speaker, for and on behalf of the people of Kitui County, I vote yes.
Yes, you can learn through again if to check whether there is someone who has not voted.
Senator Abbas Sheikh Mohammed, Wajir County. Senator Boy Issa Juma, Kwale County.
Mr. Speaker, Kwale County vote yes.
Senator Chesang Alan Kiprotich, Trans Nzoia County. Senator Ekomwa James Lomenen, Turkana County. Senator Kamau Joseph Githuku, Lamu County. Senator Keroche Tabitha Karanja, Nakuru County. Senator Mundigi Alexander Munyi, Embu County. Senator Murango James Kamau, Kirinyaga County. Senator Mwenda Gataya Mofaya, Tharaka Nithi County. Senator Mwinyihaji Mohamed Faki, Mombasa County. Senator Nderitu John Kinywa, Laikipia County. Senator Ngugi Joe Joseph Nyutu, Murang'a County. Senator Richard Julius Murgo, West Pokot County. Senator Thangwa Paul Karungo, Kiambu County. Senator Wakili Hilary Kiprotich, Sigei, Bomet County. Senator Wamatinga Wahome, Nyeri County.
Okay, the chair now has the results, and I hope there will be no asking me to open the server. Senator Benthu. The results are ayes 32 and no 0, and no 0 abstentions. So the ayes have it. Yes, do the bars and open the doors. Now let's go to the previous zone again. We clear the statements. Now you get the statement from Senator Mohamed Chute.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Requesting for a statement on non-remittance of statutory deductions from the staff of the county government of Marsabit to the National Hospital Insurance Fund, National Social Security Fund, and LAB Fund. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from a standing committee on labor and social welfare. This is on non-remittance of statutory deductions from the staff of the county government of Marsabit to the National Hospital Insurance Fund, National Social Security Fund, and LAF Fund by the county government of Marsabit. In the statement, the committee should, 1, report on the status of NHIF, NSSF, LAB Fund, and loan deductions from the staff of Marsabit County and subsequent remittances to NHIF, NSSF, and LAB Fund. 2, state why the county government of Marsabit has failed to remit the statutory deductions despite deducting the same from the staff, and inform the Senate on actions that has been taken against the staff responsible for this failure. Number 3, elucidate on the measures, if any, the ministry has undertaken to mitigate against such incidences where county governments do not remit statutory deductions so as to avert future health crises. Number 4, state the number of advisors, their status, full names, dates appointed, core duties, and salaries directly employed under the governor's office. And finally, provide status of gratuity remittances for CEOs, CECs, Public Service Board members, and the County Assembly members, detailing what is outstanding yet to be remitted and actions to be taken against the officers responsible for failure of timely remittances. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next, Senator for Nandi County, Samson Chelagay.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Request for statement on the reintroduction of bank charges on mobile wallets. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget regarding the reintroduction of bank charges on the mobile wallets such as M-Pesa, Airtel Money, and T-Cash. In the statement, the committee should, 1, explain reasons for failure by the Central Bank of Kenya to set a standard fee to be charged on mobile wallets by all banks to avert exploitation meted on the Kenyans by commercial banks across the country. Mr. Speaker, number 2, provide the current rates charged on mobile wallets per transaction in the process of moving funds to and from the bank, excluding the 20% excise duty charged by the government and the state actions, if any, to be taken against banks that fail to disclose the amounts charged through this transaction. Mr. Speaker, and finally, outline measures, if any, put in place by the National Treasury to cushion Kenyans against exploitation by commercial banks with respect to charges on mobile money transactions, considering, Mr. Speaker, the current hard economic times and noting that Kenya's shillings 10 billion that is transacted on an average per day via mobile money transactions, be it M-Pesa, Airtel Money, or T-Cash, and make it a key driver of the economy. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'll give comments at the end of the next three statements, then we consolidate the comments. Next is Senator Christo Asige. You had a statement to make.
Not Chair. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't aware that my statement was in today's order paper. Kindly excuse me and allow me to read it in the next session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Aminda Kibwana. Senator Tabitha Mutinda. Okay, those three statements has been deferred till the next sitting. Yes, I want to give at least 2 comments from both sides. Senator Kisang, William.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I wish to make comments on the last 3. One is, Honorable Speaker, by the time employees are paid, they get paid their gross salary, which includes pay as you earn, which is a statutory deduction, NSSF, NHIF, and pension deduction, is part of the salary. So we don't see the reason why the county government of Marsabit and others are not remitting these statutory deductions. Honorable Speaker, we need to compel these counties to pay, and also pay including the penalties, because I know NHIF charged almost 200% penalties. The employees are not enjoying, they'll not enjoy interest on non-remitted pension or NSSF. Honorable Speaker, this is a serious matter that we need to look at and invite the governors to tell us why they're not remitting. Honorable Speaker, on the second, by the Senator for Nandi County, Honorable Speaker, Kenyans are going through very difficult economic times. And I don't know why Central Bank decided to reintroduce interest on wallet money. So we need, Honorable Speaker, that they go back, because Kenyans are still suffering from what happened during the COVID times. We need them to rescind the decision so that we go back where we were 2 years ago. Finally, Honorable Speaker, on doctors, I know we had made comments on Ministry of Health from denying our doctors who are not employed from going out of the country. Doctors, like any other profession, when they go to the university, they take loan and they sponsor themselves. Others are sponsored by their parents, or they take higher education loans board and they go to school like everybody else. So what is so special to deny them from traveling and looking for opportunities so that they can start paying a loan, they can help their families? If the ministry want to deny them from traveling and looking for opportunities, then it is time that they employ all doctors who have graduated, who have been licensed, so that they don't suffer staying within the country and doing nothing, and they have gone to school. And you know, these are the top, they were our top students in KCSE. So what are we telling those who are in class 8, who are in high school, and they intend to pursue medicine? If we stop them from looking for opportunities to help themselves and help their families, what will happen? So, Honorable Speaker, we need to ask the ministry to rescind the decision. Thank you.
Senator Cheptumo. Senator Lenku, Sekirenku, or Kanar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise also to support the motion on the statement from Mheshimiwa Senator from Marsabit on the issue of non-remittance of staff, non-remittance of staff. I want to support that this is a very motive issue where the counties are not remitting the statutory deductions, not just the statutory deductions, but even loans and even SACCO dues for members. And this is a very big issue. It's a very motive issue in the counties. This non-remittance is accruing a lot of arrears in the counties, and that makes counties to have a lot of pending bills, even to their own staff. I know very well that governors have a lot of money that they are getting from the control of budget in full in terms of personnel emolument. This is a very, it's an issue. It's an issue where we need to know as the Senate, particularly from the committee concerned, that why the control of budget is giving counties a full amount of money in pay personnel emolument, but they don't remit this money to the statutories, to the institutions that are required, like the NHIF, where they don't have the money from the counties. And that makes a triple effect to the employee of the county, where they don't even go to hospital, they don't enjoy the NHIF benefits, and even the statutories like payee, the banks pay the net salaries from the employees of the counties. This is a very emotive issue. We want to support this statement and say that as the committee sits down with the governors, concerns, because I think even to myself also, I'm being affected as a county. And to make the matter worse, we see like counties are even employing more staff to those offices without even following the due process. And that also accumulates arrears within the employees. So I think I do support this, and I want to see the future of this statement as we get the response from the governors. Thank you.
And then two statements which the owners were not allowed, but since we agree this is a week of forgiveness, I give them a chance to give their statements. Senator Kibwana. Senator Kibwana. Later. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, can
Senator
I say something?
Kibwana, I give you the opportunity to give out your statement.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say something on statutory
How can you
deductions.
call for a point when you are working? You know, you must have orders, Senator Kiruri.
Mr. Speaker,
now you raise your finger working. You start point of order from the highest. What is your point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My point of order is that I have been waiting for my motion very patiently for 3 days. And the order paper keeps changing. People who have been absent when their statement has been called are walking in and asking for leniency. When I've been patiently waiting to actually move the motion on sanitary towels, Mr. Speaker.
Who are you challenging in that aspect?
I am just saying, Mr. Speaker, if we can
Who
follow
has refused your motion not
I'm
to
just
go
saying, my point of order is, if we can follow the order paper, Mr. Speaker, if we can follow the order paper, because let's be serious,
What is out of order, Senator Ngirore? I'm
What
not
is out of
you.
order is that
All those issues are in the order paper.
Yes, but Mr. Speaker,
Consult your machine.
when you called upon them, they were absent
Proceed,
in the House.
Senator Kibwana.
Point of order.
What is Senator Chute Mohammed?
Mr. Speaker, I also have a similar motion, and I think, Madam, because I think the clerks are following some.
Clerks by the chair. She's challenging the chair.
Yes,
not
yeah, that's why she's out of order.
Yes,
Yes.
completely out of order. Senator Kibwana, proceed. Senator Kajwang, you're eating into the next order, which is, you know. Yes. What is it, Senator Kajwang?
Mr. Speaker, you know, it's not always war when we're in the House. But I just wanted to inform Senator Gloria Orwoba of Standing Order number 45 on sequence of proceedings. Mr. Speaker, statements come before motions. So I just wanted to inform her that the proceedings are fairly organized. And Mr. Speaker, you undertook that today you are not starting a fight, and I want to congratulate you for that.
Senator Gloria, you know, Senator Kibwana, can you kindly...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to pursuant Standing Order 531 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Lands, Environment and Natural Resources on the steps taken to achieve Kenya's greenhouse gas emission reduction targets to set out in the nationally determined contributions NDCs updated in 2020. In the statement, the committee should table a progress report on the achievements of the greenhouse gas emissions.
Sorry, Senator Kibwana, the statement I have is totally different from what you are in.
I have two statements, Mr. Speaker.
What
Which
was
one do you
recorded
have?
was only one. Yeah? Because you cannot read something that I don't have. Otherwise, you can read some more Kenya in the House.
No, I had to.
The one approved is the influx of Cuban doctors. The other one maybe is pending. You can read this one.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my statement is on unemployed Kenyan doctors and the influx of Cuban doctors in the healthcare system. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 531 to seek a statement in the Standing Committee on Health on the crisis of unemployed Kenyan doctors and the influx of Cuban doctors in Kenya's healthcare system. In the statement, the committee should state measures, if any, to address the issue of unemployment among Kenyan doctors, giving reasons for the significant number of unemployed doctors despite the increasing demand for healthcare services. Number two, Mr. Speaker, apprise the Senate on the plans to ensure that Cuban doctors are working in areas where there's a genuine shortage of specialized medical personnel and not displacing unemployed Kenyan doctors. Number three, states efforts in ensuring that Kenyan doctors are provided with the necessary resources and support to improve their skills and remain competitive in the job market. Number four, state measures, if any, by the Ministry of Health to provide opportunities for young doctors to gain the practical experience necessary to the competitive in the job market end. And the last, but not the least, state strategic interventions made by the government to ensure Kenya's healthcare system is sustainable and self-sufficient without doctors from other countries. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Last statement, Senator Tabitha.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget regarding claims of fraudulent activities involving customers' accounts in various Kenyan banks. In the statement, the committee should investigate claims of fraudulent withdrawals of funds from accounts belonging to customers at various Kenyan banks. Explain the measure that they have put in place by various banks adversely mentioned in frauds involving customers' account and the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya to stem such activities that cast aspirations on the bank security system. And outline the actions put in place, if any, by banks where fraud cases have been reported to ensure customers who have lost their monies in such criminal activities have been compensated. Mr. Speaker, I submit, and I would like just to point out that from where I sit, we got evidence.
Senator Mutinda, you have made your statement, unless any other member can be able to
Thank you,
support
Mr. Speaker. I stand guided. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I can't see anybody interested to say something on that. But the last one, let us get the last statement, then I give you. Yeah, the last one, Senator Christo Asige. I'm told you have now the statement in your system. Proceed.
The mic? Oh, thank you. Yes, I do now. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights on the status of implementation of the Legal Aid Act number 6 of 2016. In the statement, the committee should appraise the Senate on the state of implementation of the Act in providing affordable, accessible, sustainable, credible, and accountable legal aid services to individuals in Kenya in accordance with the Constitution since its commencement on the 10th of May 2016, outlining the operations of the legal aid scheme. State the number of cases taken up by the National Legal Aid Service in providing representation of persons granted legal aid under the Act. State efforts undertaken by the office in promoting legal awareness and access to the service in the last 5 years, outlining any challenges encountered. State measures undertaken in supporting the legal services through establishing justice advisory state centers and research. State the amount of public funds allocated to the Legal Aid Fund since its inception, stating how funds allocated have been spent since its inception, and state measures, if any, undertaken in promoting alternative dispute resolution mechanisms to enhance, let me do that again. State measures, if any, in promoting alternative dispute resolution methods that enhance justice in accordance with the Constitution. I thank you.
What you missed is enhanced access to justice. Thank you, Senator Sige. Let us get a few comments from Little John Kinyua, Senator Laikipia. Limit yourselves to 1.5 minutes.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipa fursa hii. Kwanza napenda kupongeza Senator Cherargei kwa taarifa aliyoleta katika bunge na kuuliza ya kwamba wakati huu ambapo bado kuna janga la njaa, kuna ukame kila mahali, ilhali Banki Kuu imesema ya kwamba watu wanakapokuwa kutuma pesa wakitumia simu zao za rununu watarejesha yale malipo ambayo walikuwa wakilipa. Bwana Spika, mimi ningependa kuuliza kamiti ambayo imepatiwa fursa hili iangalie mambo haya kwa kindani na Wizara ya Fedha waweze kusaidia Wakenya kwa sababu wakati huu bado wako na shida. wako na shida na wangependa kuwa waendelee.
Senator Okech, what is your point of order?
I'm just raising on point of order number 1, on the time you provide for this session. Given that we have had a lot of statements made, Mr. Speaker, that have got very serious concerns, and I've seen you have given my colleague, the good senator of Laikipia, 1.5 minutes, Mr. Speaker. I want to plead to you just to adjust it a little bit upwards so that we can be able to contribute in some of the pertinent issues raised by these statements. I think there are almost 4 statements.
But now you're eating into the good time you are requesting to have.
I yield back, Mr. Speaker, if you just consider that time.
Comments.
Thank you.
Asante Jua Kech kwa kusema niongezee muda. Sikutaka kusema kwamba tayari alisema nikiwa hapa, kama ningemwambia niongezee muda kana kwamba ningekuwa nikimuonyesha, kwa sababu nimekaa katika kiti kile na mimi naelewa jukumu alionayo. Kwa hivyo asante, nashukuru Senator Akech. Lakini Bwana Speaker, mimi nasema ya kwamba ni vizuri Wizara ya Fedha iangalie hayo mambo kwa kindani na aweze kuambia Banki Kuu ni vizuri hayo malipo yasiweze kurejeshwa, kwa sababu bado yale makali ya ugonjwa wa corona yanaendelea kuadhiri wa Kenya kila mahali. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri kwanza wangoje, wapatie wa Kenya muda, hata kama ni miezi mingine 6 ama mwaka mmoja, waweze kurejelewa na hali yao ya kawaida, Bwana Speaker. Kwa sababu kufanya hiyo itakuwa wafanya wa Kenya kuendelea kuadhiriwa na haya makame. Kwa hivyo Bwana Speaker, ningeomba ya kwamba kamati inayoshughulikia ifuatilie hayo mambo kwa kindani. Bwana Speaker, kuna taarifa ambayo imeletwa kuhusu vile banki zetu zinavyo wanyanyasa wa Kenya kwa kuingia katika akaunti zetu na kutoa pesa kiholela. Bwana Speaker, ni vizuri haya mambo yaangaliwe kabisa. Bwana Speaker, unapata ya kwamba mtu katika akaunti yake amewacha akiwa na kiasi fulani cha pesa, alafu wakati anapoenda kutoa, pengine analipa hospitali ama anataka kulipia mtoto shule, anapata pesa tayari zimetolewa, na zimetolewa kwa njia ambayo hafahamu na haielewi. Bwana Speaker, kamati yetu ya fedha inapaswa iangalie mambo kwa kindani, na wale ambao watapatikana wamekuwa wakiwalagai wa Kenya kwa njia ile, wachukuliwe hatua za kisheria na waweze kuchukuliwa hatua kali, ili benki zetu zionekane zinafanya kazi ambazo zinapaswa kufanya, kulinda pesa zetu, lakini si kuwalagai na kuibia wa Kenya ambao wana imani na wao. Bwana Speaker, kwa hivyo naunga mkono taarifa iliyoletwa na Tabitha, na nataka kusema kamati ambayo najua inashughulikia mambo hayo ikiongozwa na senator wa kutoka Mandera, Bwana Roba, atashughulikia mambo hayo kwa kindani na apeane taarifa ya kutosha, na asiogope mtu yote, banki ziogopwe, waangalie mambo kwa kindani, kwa sababu Wakenya wanalagaiwa, Wakenya wanadhulumiwa. Bwana Speaker, ile inanistua ni ya kwamba pesa kidogo ulionayo ukitoa kwa benki, unasikia kwamba kama saa hii Banki Kuu ya Kenya tayari wamerejesha, wanasema wanarejesha yale malipo, tayari unakatwa. Mnayo banki, kuna wale ambao ni wakora tayari wameiba katika akaunti yako. Bwana Speaker, inashindwa, kwani unaishi katika nchi gani? Kama hautaibiwa na banki, utaibiwa, pesa yako itachukuliwa na Banki Kuu ya Kenya. Mtu wa Laikipia, kama hata ule ambaye na mifugo, ameuza mifugo amepeleka kwa banki, kama mifugo haijaibiwa na wakora, Bwana Speaker, unapata ataibiwa katika banki. Kama si kwa banki, ni katika ni hii mambo ya kutoa ushuru wakati unatuma na hizi simu zetu. Kwa hivyo Bwana Speaker, unashindwa, ukimbilie benki hapana, ukimbilie simu hapana, ukimbilie nani? Mimi naona kile ambacho kitakachofaa sasa, tutakimbilia kamati ambayo inahusika na tumtegemee Mwenyezi Mungu. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Senator Danson Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, my comment is in reference to the statement by the Honorable Senator who raised the issue of the 4,000 unemployed doctors. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to say 2 very quick things. The first one is that at the continental level, we as a country are encouraging that we have a free movement of labor. And this is the position Kenya is taking at the Continental Parliament, in the Pan-African Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, it is a very strange thing to hear that the Ministry of Health is telling doctors that they are barred from moving from this country to go and seek employment in other parts of the country or in other parts of the continent or the world. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is where we are going. Kenya is noted as a country that has one thing, which is a big what is it called? A big resource, which is educated population, Mr. Speaker. So we are encouraging the Health Committee to look at this question vis-a-vis continental commitments and international commitments that Kenya has made in terms of encouraging migration of labor. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we want to ask the Health Committee, as is looking at this statement, to also look at the fact that some counties like Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, they do not have sufficient doctors. So how does it come that doctors are unemployed and counties such as Tana River counties remain with insufficient medical employees? So, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, as they are looking at this question, they will then also need to look at those two issues as they do their investigation. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Andrew Okech. And allow me to give two members from this end, and then we make progress.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity, and I rise to make a brief comment on the statement that was issued by the Senator of Marsabit, Senator Chute Mohammed Said. I think that, Mr. Speaker, the issue of statutory deductions in this country is becoming a very serious issue, and it's actually becoming a death sentence to many of Kenyans. Because if you have worked very hard over the course of a month to be able to serve your county in different capacity, Mr. Speaker, and your county is able to pay you your salary at the end of the month, and a simple issue of the county having to deduct your money and remit it to the different statutory deductions that they're supposed to be remitted, Mr. Speaker, it becomes very difficult to fathom why it takes years for that money to be remitted to the relevant funds, Mr. Speaker. We have got situations like, of course, what my brother Chute has talked about here, Senator Chute has talked about here, in Marsabit, which is not dissimilar to places like Migori County, Mr. Speaker, where staff go to hospitals and then you are told your NHIF is not working. Reason being, there was no money that was remitted, Mr. Speaker. And we are ending up sending populations of Kenyans to serious problems. Mr. Speaker, there are families that today are stuck in hospitals because they can't pay their bills. And you can't understand the reason why, after being deducted, you are told that you're not able to pay for your bills. In any case, Mr. Speaker, this also goes to our national strategy for ensuring economic development, Mr. Speaker. Reason being, right now, a worker in Kenya has got almost 5 deductions, Mr. Speaker, that they must make. You have got NHIF, you have got retention fund, you have got payee, you have got NSSF, you have got pension fund, Mr. Speaker. Payee, NSSF, and pension funds alone take up to 57% of a Kenyan salary in this kind of job that we're seeing in the counties, Mr. Speaker. We are going to a dangerous path, Mr. Speaker, that people will now not see their sense of working. Because if you add NHIF and retention funds, over 60% of what Kenyans are earning end up going to deductions, and therefore there's no incentive to work, Mr. Speaker. So I think that as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, this House should consider, even apart from just committing this statement to the relevant committee, I would propose, Mr. Speaker, that my brother, Senator Chute, should actually consider bringing a motion in this House on having serious pensive measures on people who end up not remitting deductions for the people who work for counties and also any other parastatals that you have in the country, Mr. Speaker. And with that, we can be able to allow our people be able to get their right share of what they need to earn in the counties, Mr. Speaker. And I do support Senator Chute passionately about this, and I hope you can bring it as a motion next time, and we'll support you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Last but not the least, Senator Olekina Redamo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a good day that we are dealing with matters that affect our people. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the three statements, and I hope that the Secretariat will be able to extract our comments from the Hansard so that they can be able to follow, now that we have a new system where we are commenting on statements all at once. Mr. Speaker, let me begin with a statement by Senator Tabitha. Mr. Speaker, I would like to request the committee that you've committed this statement on, and I believe that is the finance and budget, to really interrogate this issue of these financial institutions tapping into people's accounts and deducting money. Mr. Speaker, there is a famous case of a young lady who all banks now are afraid of in this country because she took them to court, and the only thing she wanted was to request for her bank statement. If you request for bank statement, Mr. Speaker, particularly if you take a loan, most financial institutions that probably have transferred your loan from one bank to another will hesitate giving you that statement. Recently, Mr. Speaker, I was approached by an MCA, a sitting MCA from Kiambu, who brought in a gentleman who took a loan from one financial institution, and then when he took a loan from that financial institution, the institution is National Bank of Kenya. The manager from that branch, Mr. Speaker, advised him that the best way for him to grow his business is through invoice discounting. From that moment, the gentleman became disillusioned because he didn't know how the interest started accumulating. Whenever he went there and he would say, "Can you give me the amortization table? Let me see how much I've paid you versus how much I need to pay you." The story, Mr. Speaker, will shock you. The gentleman borrowed 26 million. By the end of the day, the banks were discussing on how they can convert the 23 million to a loan of 126 million. This is affecting very many Kenyans. So I would request the committee that will be looking at this matter to be able to summon Kenya Bankers Association, the governor of Central Bank, so that they can be able to go through, and any other Kenyan who is out there who is suffering. Because, Mr. Speaker, the statement that has been brought by Senator Tabitha is a statement that is affecting very many Kenyans. I know I have assisted so many Kenyans renegotiate, restructure their loans from different financial institutions, but this is a matter that this Senate, now that it is seized of that matter, the committee must now take a keen interest and have a serious inquiry, because these are the things that leads to a class action suit on financial institutions. There's a lot of fraud in Kenyan banks, a lot of charges which are charged, and I think it is a high time that we broaden the scope so that we can be able to save Kenyans who are losing a lot of money. Mr. Speaker, on the second statement by Senator Chute. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, we had the control of budget in one of our committees. And it shocked us because this issue of pending bills is really a creation of some unscrupulous individuals who sits in the county treasuries, and also, most important, the CEOs of finance in every county government. There's absolutely no reason, Mr. Speaker, as to why counties should be requisitioning money to pay a certain expense but end up diverting money. We looked at Article 207 of the Constitution. We looked at the PFM Act in terms of money being requisitioned from the control of budget. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, this issue, if you look at PFM Act, I believe it's section 103.3, it states the head of Treasury to be the CEC Finance. But the interpretation, even by the control of budget, is that the CEC Finance is not the head of Treasury, and he needs second approval. So, Mr. Speaker, I would request that the committee which will be looking at this matter invite the control of budget, and this House comes up with a mechanism whereby the control of budget, because Article 207 mandates her to only release money that she feels is going to be used effectively after following the requisition, to ensure that she can come up with an administrative process or procedure so that whenever county government requisition money, they must indicate there that we have requisition money to pay NHIF, to pay NSSF, to pay all these other retirement benefits. Because it is sad that Kenyans go to hospitals, they cannot be treated because their NHIF card is not working, yet that money was deducted. It is even in their payslip. It shows that that money has been deducted. And Mr. Speaker, this is not only affecting county governments, even here in the Senate. You know, by the time we get our own money for our staff, sometimes we get letters from KRA saying these statutory reductions have not been remitted, you have to pay a penalty. Sometimes we go into our own pocket to pay for our staff NHIF, or we prepay in advance so that if any of our staff who are working so hard for us fall sick, they can be treated. So we need to be proactive, and I would request that Senator Chute, you push Senator Ali Roba, have a discussion, see how administratively the controller budget can ensure that any requisition, before she approves a second requisition, for requisition of salary, county government must demonstrate that they have actually paid these statutory bodies. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on the other statement by my good sister, Senator Hamida, the issue of doctors and the issue of healthcare in this country is something which we must all look at on a very serious note. I want to inform all our colleagues that I sit in the Health Committee. And when we are looking at the budget policy statement, some of the direction that the government wants to take us leads to clawing back on devolved functions. Health is devolved. Health being devolved, it is a shame, Mr. Speaker, that majority of money, in fact, if you look at the budget, which is held by the Ministry of Health, it is equivalent to shareable revenue for about 5 counties. The direction that we are taking on, Mr. Speaker, now, where the Treasury is proposing to do the following things. One, to hire community health workers. Number 2, to set up a commission similar to the one of teachers, is something which is going to claw back, and in most cases, our doctors, our kids will not continue being employed. I think what we ought to do, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that the committee can explore this, is where we as a Senate, we push for more money to go to the health, to the counties, and mandate county governments to give us a list of all the doctors that they have hired. We work with our institutions, because we are now getting doctors from Cuba. I don't have a problem with getting expertise. But where are we getting doctors from Cuba, yet our own sons and daughters are unemployed? If we look at this issue of the health devolved function, and we push this government to ensure that more money goes to counties, more money is allocated, and each of the county allocates about, at a minimum, 30% of their budget to the health item or docket, we can be able to hire more teachers, more doctors. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you. I know I'm short of time, but I hope that this item will be able to assist this country.
Okay, next, last statement by the majority leader.
Mr. Speaker, before I before I give my statement, Mr. Speaker, you know I'm laughing because it's my birthday, and the senator for Migori has gifted me 100 shillings and told me, please go and have tea. So I'd wish to appreciate his kind gesture, Mr. Speaker. It's not the amount, it is the act and the thought that matters. I've never, Mr. Speaker, in my entire life in Parliament, Ledama has never bought me anything. It was not your money. So, Mr. Speaker, before I make my statement, there's only one thing that I want to speak about, the statement by my very good friend, Senator Hamida Kibwana, on this issue of health. And I heard the comments of my good friend, Senator Ledama. I hear you, Senator Ledama, and the concerns that we keep on raising about the health sector in our counties and how health is handled. And I know we need to pump lots of money to our counties, especially on the health function. But, Mr. Speaker, we must also ask very difficult questions. Is it possible, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps we missed a step? Thank you. Is it possible, Mr. Speaker, that we missed a step when we allowed teachers to keep their entire human resource and their practice held under the national function in TSC, such that their promotional standards are similar, they can be moved across the country, and they are at least assured of a pay? The sad reality, Senator Ledama, if you speak to doctors in your county, in all our counties, is that you can imagine the best of brains that we have in our country sometimes go for 2, 3, 4 months without pay because of this, the rise and fall of how our county governments continue to operate. And even to do just a simple matter as a transfer. I spoke to a friend of mine recently who's a doctor and transferred from one particular...
Just a minute, Majority Leader. I was an issue Senator wants to inform you on something.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on this matter of doctors and salaries and human resource at the county, Mr. Speaker, I think there is something that probably has not come out very clearly. The payment of salaries in counties is not a favor to doctors or any other civil servant. The fact of the matter is this: whenever salaries delay in counties, it delays for the entire county public service staff, including doctors, drivers, agriculture officers, planners, and all the staff employed in the county. And the delay is not of the making of county governments, Mr. Speaker. I think there's something that we really have. And I think as a Senate has tried to crack the matter of timely releases. But because of the mischief in Treasury, Central Bank, and control of budget, we have had a difficulty in that matter. Mr. Speaker, this matter of health, human resource management at the counties is a matter we want to have a very serious conversation so that this matter can be addressed once and for all.
Do you want to inform the
I wanted to inform the majority leader that the delay of salary payments in counties is not only for doctors. When there is a delay, it is for the entire county public service staff. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you.
The chairman of Health Committee for that information. I was under no illusion that this is of the making of counties. But maybe he missed a part where I introduced this conversation from Mr. Speaker and asked if by doctors not being not having, remember there had been conversation about National Health Service Unit or, and things like that, that teachers, for example, continue to enjoy better treatment, at least in terms of their promotion, uniformity of service. They're able to move from one county to the other. They have timely receiving of salaries, Mr. Speaker, unlike our doctors. I was just drawing a parallel. In fact, I wanted to give the Senator Mandago, who I agree with on most of the things that he said, a challenge. When doctors transfer from one county to the other, that is where most of the time hell begins from them. I know a case of a doctor, a friend of mine who spoke to me recently and pointed out to me that when they moved their services from Elgeyo Marakwet County to Bomet County, for the last almost 4 or 5 months, they have been just trying to get their, that unique number for public servants. I think it's called the IDDP number, IPPD, transferred from one county to the other. And now you can imagine the form and shape of our doctors. Most of them are not in the form of activists, that they know how to push and chase things around. When they are professionally told that, wait, it's being handled, many of them will dutifully execute their job, but you can imagine what it means to stay for 3, 4, 5 months without pay. At least in the non-skilled labor sector, they don't have many of these particular challenges. That's why I picked on the one for doctors specifically. And it's a conversation which I want maybe him as a chair of the challenge that I want to give Senator Mandago as a chair of health, based on his experience as a county governor for 2 terms. I think he best suits and will be of greater value to us as Senate, if at least he's able then to crack for us the issue of transfer of service for doctors, not losing their benefits, ensure that when they are being promoted, they are treated and paid equally across, and all these challenges that doctors keep on raising with us when you meet them across. So it's a challenge that we need to speak about. So Senator Amida, thank you for bringing this to the Senate. I hope you will follow up with the committee and get good answers. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move on to, oh, thank you. This is, but you have not given me the pin. She has given me her ATM, Mr. Speaker, but no pin. Senator Ledama gave me 1,000 shillings, Mr. Speaker, but I want to spend it first before I say thanks, because I'm not very sure it is a legitimate banknote. At least for AD, it is a pesa, you know. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 57-1. I hereby present to the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, the 28th of February, 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, on Tuesday, 28th February, 2023, the Senate Business Committee will consider and approve business for the day. This is projected to contain business that will not be concluded from today's order paper and any other business scheduled by the Senate Business Committee. Of note is a consideration of the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the Budget Policy Statement and the report of the Standing Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs and Human Rights on the nominee for the appointment of the position of non-member of Parliament Commissioner to PSC. I think the deadline is next week, Tuesday. So members of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee need to conclude on that business, Mr. Speaker. I urge the 2 select committees to consider these matters within the stipulated timelines and table reports thereon by Tuesday, the 28th of February, 2023. The order paper for Wednesday, 1st March 2023, and for Thursday, 2nd March 2023, will contain business that will not be concluded on Tuesday, 28th Feb 2023, and Wednesday, 1st of March 2023, respectively, as well as petitions, statements, and any other business scheduled by the SBC. Mr. Speaker, sir, in terms of legislative business, 13 bills are awaiting the second reading stage. 4 of these bills are scheduled in today's order paper, order number 9, 10, 11, and 12. Further, 3 bills are undergoing concurrence as contemplated under Article 110(3) of the Constitution. I urge the respective movers to be available in the chamber to move these bills for a smooth transition to the next stage. Aside from that, the business listed in the order paper for today and the one stated earlier for Tuesday, 28th February 2023, my office is following up on the Joint Committee report on Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate and the Departmental Committee on Finance Planning and Trade of the National Assembly on the nominee of appointment to the position of Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Kenya. I take this opportunity to request the select committees to consider the matter within the stipulated timelines. Mr. Speaker, I must make a comment here that many of our committees seem not aware that under our own legislative provisions, parliamentary vetting policy and the rest, I'm seeing many of our committees pushing vetting and the approval of certain reports, Mr. Speaker, to the last day, which is not a very good way of working, Mr. Speaker. I hope many of our committees can be guided by their clerks and the technical office that is here, so that at least if you're supposed to do a vetting and complete the report, don't wait until the 14th day is when you're doing public hearings and you want members to read the report and members to approve on that particular day. It doesn't give a very good show for us. I hope the committee chairpersons that are here and members of Secretariat who are assisting our committees can help actually us out of that behavior that I see creeping into the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, members of the public continue to show confidence in the Senate by submitting petitions on diverse matters. Presently, there are 4 petitions before the Senate. One referred to the Standing Committee on Roads and Transport, Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights, and 2 committed to the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. Appreciating that petitions are of great importance to the people and they give the Senate a basis for undertaking its constitutional roles, we must resist the temptation of converting petitions to full-blown inquiries that run for months on end. Mr. Speaker, and this is a very important point as well, that I want to urge colleague senators and chairpersons of the various committees that have petitions before them. Petitions is just to remind you or bring to your attention that there is a particular issue that as a Senate you need to look into. Many of the time, matters that are brought before us, it will need either the assistance of investigative agencies and such matters, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I wish to challenge chairpersons and members of the various committees. 60 days as provided for by the standing orders is 60 days. I hope we can get to a point where when a Kenyan submits their petition before the Senate, that they know that in 60 days' time, a maximum of 60 days, they'll have a report before them and something to consider. I therefore urge committees to consider these petitions. I also urge the Larson Committee to take action on this matter where standing committees exceed stipulated timelines. I've said this on petitions, I've said this on public vetting as well, Mr. Speaker. With respect to statements, there have been numerous statements sought pursuant to Standing Order number 53 and a good number committed to committees for consideration pursuant to Standing Order number 52.3. I continue to urge respective committees to expedite the consideration of statements and table reports pursuant to the standing orders. Number 10, Mr. Speaker, over and above the statements and petitions under consideration, which have highlighted a number of issues affecting our constituents, I encourage senators and respective standing committees to identify and come up with the legislative interventions that will be converted into bills. On statements, Mr. Speaker, there's a comment that I'd wish to make, and I wish I could say this when we have majority of the senators. We are sworn in as, yes, we represent specific constituencies, but many times I see statements be presented before us that are of an extremely narrow nature, narrow in the sense that even on a problem that affects the entire country, a senator is only interested in saying, please let me have the answers only for a particular county. I think because this is the upper house, Mr. Speaker, on many occasions, actually we have sworn to defend and protect the Constitution. We are senators of the Republic of Kenya. If you're presenting before the Senate a particular statement, Mr. Speaker, and you know that that particular problem or challenge that you want addressed affects more than one county, Mr. Speaker, there is no harm in seeking for the statement and perhaps drafting it in a better way that reflects your standing as a senator of the Republic of Kenya, as opposed to a particular county and saying, oh, I wish to know there's a chief in a particular region. You know, Mr. Speaker, we are slowly moving out of that habit. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I do recall that back in the day, in my very first days in the Senate, statements have really evolved. It was not unusual to find statements on people wanting a chief transferred. a sub-location which has done this or the other, you still find occasionally one or two members who would make that request, unless the matter is of great national importance and you feel that in your own way you cannot address it as a senator. That's a point that you bring a local matter to the floor of a Senate. Otherwise, most of the time, we borrow from the challenges that are in our specific county, but seek a solution that will solve the problem across the country. That's the attitude which I wish to request colleague senators to adopt, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to request for patience and understanding of all senators and the country as the Senate leadership engages to resolve on the matter of change in the minority party leadership. Let us look beyond our differences in service to the people of Kenya. I hope we can quickly put this matter to rest as we agreed during the leaders' meeting that we had this morning, Mr. Speaker. I thank you and hereby lay the statement of the table on the table of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Majority Leader. All the statements that came under standing order 53-1 stands committed to the respective standing committees of the Senate. Next order.
Order number 9, the County Vocational Education and Training Bill, Senate Bills number 3 of 2022, second reading.
Is the move of the motion around? Senator Moses Kajwang? Sorry? Okay. He is not around, so we defer that motion to the next sitting. Next order.
Order number 10, the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2022, second reading.
Senator Danson Mungatana, are you ready?
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to move this bill and have it read second reading. Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2022, seeks in the memorandum of that bill to achieve certain goals. Mr. Speaker, just so that honorable senators who are following from inside and outside the chamber can understand.
Sorry, Senator Mungatana, you start that you seek to move the second reading.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I thought I did that.
Can you?
But I can do again. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move for second reading
The
Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2022. I did say that, Mr. Speaker.
Indeed, it's okay.
I think some of these people are not listening and misleading the chair. He had me, yes.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to lay the foundation why we needed to have this bill and amend the Powers and Privileges Act so that those colleagues of mine who are following this debate from inside and outside the House can follow. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to enhance the powers that Senate has over its decisions, over its resolutions, as opposed to the powers that Senate has over its decisions which are passed into law. Mr. Speaker, all the Constitution, what has been happening with all bills, we do a first reading, we then do a second reading, we do a third reading, and then, Mr. Speaker, it is taken to the president and it becomes law. Once it is assented by the president, civil servants, members of the executive, they all take this attitude, Mr. Speaker, that a law is a law and it is binding. So a law always has consequences. If you don't do this, then this will happen to you. If you are a member of the executive or you are a civil servant that supports the execution of the laws that we have passed in this Senate, ordinarily, Mr. Speaker, they have a fear of the compulsion of the law that we pass here. Mr. Speaker, when we come to decisions of this House through motions, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to decisions of this House through bills, the attitude is different. When the Senate pronounces itself here, and not only the Senate, Mr. Speaker, even the National Assembly, when they pass a motion, the attitude of the executive is that that is merely persuasive. It does not have compulsion of the law. So what has happened is, senators here, Mr. Speaker, they debate, they come to an agreement as a House that this is the decision, this is the resolution of the House. All of us, we agree as a Senate that this motion be passed. But Mr. Speaker, after that, the process that happens is that the clerk of the Senate would ordinarily then write to the relevant department of the government to inform them that there is a decision by the Senate, there is a resolution by the Senate that this and this be done as far as a motion is concerned. So, Mr. Speaker, there are various motions that we have passed, and I have also moved a motion here in this House, in this session, and we've been able to pass it. The clerk has followed up with the necessary action. But, Mr. Speaker, the attitude of the civil service, the attitude of the executive has been and continues to be that if it is a motion that is passed by the House, it is not compulsory to follow it. It's a persuasion, maybe a strong persuasion. So, Mr. Speaker, what this bill seeks to change is that attitude. Mr. Speaker, I've had the fortune of serving in the executive, and I know from experience what I'm talking about. That when Parliament has passed a law and it has been assented by the President, we take it very seriously. We used to take it very seriously, and that attitude continues. But, Mr. Speaker, when Parliament passes a motion, we merely note it and say that it's a strong persuasion from the floor of the House, but it has no compulsion. It has no binding power. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to change by introducing a law that will make it now compulsory for members of the executive and generally civil service that, Mr. Speaker, when a resolution of the House is passed here, then it must be implemented. Mr. Speaker, we have created a mechanism under this bill of timely feedback on the resolutions that are passed by this House. Mr. Speaker, the clerk of the Senate is now required, when we make this to be law, when we pass this to be law, to write to the relevant government department within a time limit of 7 days to inform them that the House has passed this resolution and it is upon these government officers to execute that resolution. Mr. Speaker, this bill, it therefore creates a timely feedback mechanisms for the resolution of Parliament or of the Senate when we pass it here. Mr. Speaker, then what happens? The person, the office of the clerk, will identify somebody in this bill who is named as a responsible officer. That responsible officer will be required to take action on the resolution that has been passed by this Senate within 60 days. Mr. Speaker, you can see that this bill is good because it is enhancing the role of the Senate. It is enhancing what Senate can do. It is also creating consequences for those who will fail to carry out and execute the resolutions of the House through motions. Mr. Speaker, what is the consequence of a responsible officer who fails to effect the resolutions? Mr. Speaker, normally what has been happening is that we have been condemning, we have been taking a dim light view of those people who are supposed to give effect to resolutions of this House. But Mr. Speaker, if it is a motion and there are no consequences, what happens is beyond the condemnations that we make, it just lapses into no effect. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is trying to correct that, is trying to correct and to therefore make effective the resolutions of this House. It is trying to fight for our space within the power structure so that instead of bringing a bill, and everybody knows how these processes of a bill are, they are long. You have to have a first reading. Mr. Speaker, you have to go and face the committee. You have to explain to them. The committee then will have 60 days to do a report, and then they will have to table the report. Mr. Speaker, then you have to move the bill, and then that bill will have to be debated, Mr. Speaker. When that bill is debated, it has to come back again for third reading, Mr. Speaker, and amendments are brought. So it's a long process. But sometimes it is so urgent to have a resolution of this House, and we cannot take that long when we are doing a motion. A motion will be speaking to an issue, a specific issue, and once the House has resolved that issue, then it will be now mandatory within the time limitations that we have created in this bill to make sure that that bill is given effect. Now, the attitude that, oh, that's just a motion by the House, that is just a persuasion, will come to an end. Responsible officers will face consequences, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what are the consequences that we are proposing in this bill? The consequences are that if a resolution of this House has been made, and we have said, for example, I have seen a bill here for provision for institution of measures to curb incessant high electricity costs, which is pending, that is being brought by the Honorable Senator Chute. Mr. Speaker, once we pass this bill and this law now is effective, it will mean that the responsible officers will have to effect what the resolution of this House is saying. And they have 60 days to do that. And if they don't bring a status report to show that this is how far we have gone in terms of compliance with the direction of the Senate, then, Mr. Speaker, if they don't do that, the responsible officer will be liable to paying a fine of 500,000 shillings, Kenya shillings, or in default, he will be liable, she will be liable to paying to a 6 months jail term. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill, Mr. Speaker, is as short as that. We are imposing statutory obligations on officers of government so that they can do what they need to do, as is the case, as is the intention of this House. Mr. Speaker, going forward, it would mean that from now on, these people in government sitting in the executive, they will be taking an interest on what motions have been placed on the order paper. They'll be taking an interest in the debates of the motions in this house. They will be taking an interest in everything that is happening here, so that if it is a motion that is touching on their department, Mr. Speaker, they will be able to execute these motions. We are going to move away from the old era where, Mr. Speaker, people used to just say motions are but persuasions of the House, but we will be waiting for the law. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in those olden days, when we were a bit younger and in the other house, when we move motions and we pass them, and we go to have them executed by departments of government, they will tell them, we will start, we will try, but why don't you bring a law? So it used to be the habit that you pass a motion and then you start the process of creating an amendment to the law or bringing a fresh bill, which was very tiring and very time-consuming. Mr. Speaker, what we are saying is that with this bill coming into law, this is going to change the way we are moving in this House. Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 of this amendment is proposing to insert a new part called Clause 4A to the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act to provide for reports on action taken on parliamentary resolutions. So, Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 captures what I've been talking about. It goes on to define who is a responsible officer and to whom, as I've said, a resolution of this House is directed at. Mr. Speaker, the new part 4A will mandate the clerk to move within 7 days to give the decision of the Senate as a resolution through a motion to the responsible officer. Mr. Speaker, the new Clause 4A will be requiring a report, a status report on the implementation of the resolution to the relevant committee within 60 days, Mr. Speaker, and it actually goes clearly to set out what kind of particulars are required in this report, the status report. So the responsible officer doesn't just write what he wants. He will be required within the arms of this law that I am proposing, Mr. Speaker, to state clearly all the information that we have sought and to state clearly the way that they have implemented, to state clearly the measures they have taken. It also allows, Mr. Speaker, for extension of time. So if the responsible officer comes and say, in this electricity cost issue that is being proposed by the Honorable Senator Mohamed Chute, that we have done this much so far, but we require time they are reporting now to the Committee of Energy. Then, Mr. Speaker, this law provides for that. So it's not a punitive law, but it is changing what has been to the new era, Mr. Speaker, to deal with resolutions of this House. Mr. Speaker, this particular law is a good law, and I'm urging fellow senators to support this. To support this because it is necessary for the Senate to get its space. I argued here yesterday that power is something that does not allow for vacuum. If we surrender our power, for example, to the executive will continue to claw away on our powers. And Mr. Speaker, this is a reality because the executive, through its cabinet secretaries, they have this attitude of creating delegated legislations and rules that sometimes even kill the entire intent of the bill from which they are creating the regulations. So, Mr. Speaker, what we are saying is that that is our power as a Senate. If we allow the executive to get away with it, they will claw on it. And I also argued yesterday, Mr. Speaker, that if we allow the judiciary to micromanage the Senate, and we say nothing about it, they will also claw away on our power as a Senate. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying in this bill, we are trying to increase our space, to increase our power, not only to limit ourselves to legislation, to have compulsion of law, but we are also saying, Mr. Speaker, now resolutions of this House through motions, Mr. Speaker, will have power, compulsion, that officers of government will take them very seriously. And Mr. Speaker, I believe that this is good for the Senate, and I urge my colleagues who are listening and following inside and out to support this bill so that we can increase our space, we can increase the effectiveness of this Senate as we continue to execute our mandate elected by the people to come and do it here. Mr. Speaker, before I sit down and take my seat, I wanted to give my thanks to the JLAC, our Justice and Legal Committee. Mr. Speaker, under the chairmanship of Wakili Hillary, they really put their time. You can see from their report, Mr. Speaker, that they took their time to look at even High Court decisions. And Mr. Speaker, the decisions that had sort of removed some sections of this law, of Powers and Privileges Act, they advised on things that need to be improved within this bill. I am grateful for the meetings they have sat and the work they did, the processing of this. I'm losing my mic. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to give thanks to the committee, the JLAC committee, the Justice and Legal Committee, for the work they did. I am very happy with the comments they made in their reports. And, Mr. Speaker, their comments have made this bill, the amendment bill, to be even richer. So, Mr. Speaker, I record my thanks to the chairman and the committee, and I beg that this bill, to move this bill to be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, I am asking my colleague, the Senator Cherargei, to second this bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cherargei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, I want to congratulate Senator Danson Munkatana for this wonderful bill. I think legislation is a continuous process to improve our efficiency and effectiveness in terms of our duty, the cardinal duty. And you know, Mr. Speaker, as the Constitution says, we derive our authority from the people. And that authority, universal suffrage, was exercised in the last general election, and that is we are here. So I want to thank him. I can see he still has the same energy. When we were growing up, we used to watch him, very vibrant. And that vibrancy has never left him. We used to be called Mulamwamba. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, whether he still eats crocodiles, but maybe he can tell us in camera when we are in your office having tea.
Did you say Mura?
Mulamwamba.
Mwamba?
Yes. Mulamwamba, sorry. the crocodile eater. So he's done an exceptional work, Mr. Speaker. And I think this is important, Mr. Speaker, and congratulate him. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is a straightforward bill. I remember there was a time, Mr. Speaker, in the last session where we are trying to come up with Committee of Implementation. I note that National Assembly has Committee on Implementation, Mr. Speaker, and therefore to follow up on some of the resolutions, Mr. Speaker. As has been said, and I note the change of speakership on the seat, Senator Wakili Hillary Sigei, the distinguished Senator of Bomet, and my lawyer on record on other matters. So, Mr. Speaker, what I was just saying is that sometimes the only thing that has a binding effect is the legislation, because we put some of the consequences that if you fail to follow, it becomes a problem, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill tries to enrich the role that has been, Mr. Speaker. When you look under Article 115 of the Constitution, on 117, sorry, of the Constitution, it talks about powers and privileges and immunities that we get as Parliament, Mr. Speaker. There shall be freedom of speech and debate in Parliament. Number 2, Parliament may, for the purposes of the orderly and effective discharge of the business of Parliament, provide for the powers, privileges, and immunities of Parliament, its committees, the leader of majority party, the leader of the minority party, the chairpersons of the committees and members. So, Mr. Speaker, this genesis of the power that Senator Danson Mungatana is trying to derive from is derived under the Constitution under Article 117. Because we are given the power to legislate, Mr. Speaker. This one tries to ensure that resolutions, because the only binding effect, Mr. Speaker, is only on legislation. But when the committee goes and sits about a statement, there are resolutions, Mr. Speaker, that are made by the committee. When there is a motion, there is a resolution when they adopt a motion on the floor of the House, Mr. Speaker. There is other matters that we adopt in the House, Mr. Speaker. Many reports and messages that are adopted in the House. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, no one asks about it. They get a dust. There is a famous, Mr. Speaker, a famous saying in this country that the reports are gathering dust somewhere in some of the offices, Mr. Speaker. This bill will ensure that is cured, Mr. Speaker, because the definition of responsible officer in ensuring. So, when, Mr. Speaker, for example, when we pass a resolution or adopt a report, in the last session we adopted a report on land historical injustice against the Talai community in Nandi and across the Kenya. For example, in that report, when I was a chair, there was a number of issues that we raised under Talai and their forceful eviction, Mr. Speaker, from Nandi and be taken to other parts, including Kericho and part of Luo Nyanza, Mr. Speaker. And that report we did recommend that the National Land Commission will issue orders of resurveying and providing alternative land and compensation. No one followed. We went ahead, Mr. Speaker, and said there should be affirmative action to ensure that the Talai community that have settled somewhere in Talai, near my place, Sironoi, Mr. Speaker, they must be given alternative land. National Commission was directed, Mr. Speaker, that the county government and national government should take affirmative action of employing some of the children and sons of Talai community, Mr. Speaker. That one was never done. Another issue, Mr. Speaker, on that report, because I'm just using an example so that members can get me, is that mutual legal assistance be provided by the national government through the Attorney General's office to pursue their justice the way some of the Mau Mau went into innings of London, Mr. Speaker. It was never done. Why? Because it was resolved, it was adopted. But there is no reporting mechanism to tell this House that on the issue of land, alternative land for Talai, the National Land Commission has done, has allocated land, the Talai has settled. There is no reporting mechanism, Mr. Speaker. Now, this law is trying to be prescriptive, Mr. Speaker. If today we say every child that goes to ECD, there must be a school feeding program for ECD if a motion is brought, Mr. Speaker. That motion, if there are resolutions, they should be in the Education Committee, Mr. Speaker, through the clerk, should be able to report back to the House and tell the House all ECD centers across the country in 47 counties are feeding daily, and therefore they are not being threatened with hunger, and ensure attendance in the classroom, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you have heard the President is working on cleaning of Nairobi River, among others in the country, and the Nairobi River Commission has been formed. And I can see my friend, the famous one, Ferdinand Waititu, is part of that commission, Mr. Speaker. That cleaning exercise is done. How do we ensure that the Committee on Lands, Environment, and Natural Resources reports back and ensure that the executive has cleaned Nairobi River, Mr. Speaker? So this bill that my brother, Senator Danson Mungatana, is trying to do is prescription. It is being prescriptive, Mr. Speaker, in reporting mechanism, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it is even implementation. Because, Mr. Speaker, if today we say maybe there are people who have been evicted, for example, anywhere across the country, Mr. Speaker, like the Ruai case during COVID season. Mr. Speaker, you remember that case. if that people of Ruai were to be resettled, for example, who will ensure those people are resettled if we do not have an implementation mechanism, Mr. Speaker? And that is why we have defined that responsible officer means the relevant public officer to whom a resolution or a report of a House or Committee of Parliament is submitted in accordance with this Act. Clause number 23B, the clerk of the relevant House, which under Article 93, you know, Parliament is both the Senate and the National Assembly, within 7 days of a resolution of the House, and the House means both, as explained by Article 9, or the tabling of a report of the Committee of the House, convey the resolution or a copy of the report, as the case may be, to the responsible officer under whose portfolio the implementation, resolution, or recommendation of the committee falls, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, what does that mean? It means if there is implementation, it must be submitted to us, and the clerk, Mr. Speaker, after the resolutions has been done, our clerks, some of them are on table office, and I know the seniority. Some of them have been with us for long. I can see the others who are new, Mr. Speaker, and they are learning the ropes. Mr. Speaker, when we resolve, we give it to the clerks to transmit. For example, if it is about resettlement, for example, we now, let me use the Light Land Historical Injustice Report. We adopt, and then we transmit to the AG a copy. We transmit to the National Land Commission a copy. That is now the work of the clerk. And that is why we have said the responsible officer is what the report has been directed to do, including the reports that I remember, Mr. Speaker, since you are also the chairperson of JLAC, we were doing a report on extrajudicial killings. There was a report. Maybe there is an obligation of the DCIO, of DPP. If, for example, Mr. Speaker, through your committee of JLAC, you direct the DPP Nurdin Aji to prosecute individuals who have been accused of extrajudicial killings, Mr. Speaker. And it is very sad. When we visited somewhere in Kwale, Mr. Speaker, and in that meeting, only women came. I was shocked. I was asking my secretariat, why are women in Kwale only attending this meeting? They told me, Chairman, what you know is that the husbands and the sons of these women of Kwale, because we were in Kwale, Mr. Speaker, they have been killed in unexplained circumstances. So if we have to, for example, another issue I wanted to give so that colleagues can get what we are driving at, is the issue of a collapse of Solai Dam, where many Kenyans were killed. And millions of liters travel a number of kilometers, Mr. Speaker, and many homes were swept away. The quality of soil was swept away, Mr. Speaker, and many people died. Others were maimed. Others are living with trauma. And at that time when we were investigating, Mr. Speaker, and our chief, I don't want to give, was it called Chief Kirago, decided to sign an indemnity form from some individuals so that they don't move to court. It is after this committee that intervened that the people of Solai, Mr. Speaker, and through my committee then, that the perpetrators of criminal negligence that caused the collapse Solai Dam in Nakuru County, Mr. Speaker, were prosecuted by DPP because they were trying to negotiate out of court, yet there was a criminal liability on that matter, Mr. Speaker. Even up to today, I remember we visited them, Mr. Speaker. There is no mechanism of ensuring that the people who suffered, either they lost their families in Solai Dam tragedy, whether they were given land, whether there was land reclamation, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, at that time, a lot of topsoil was swept. What does that mean? Most of the land around Solai is now barren. There must be land restoration and reclamation in that area. Number two, there was also that families that lost their loved ones. There were also building of houses by Kenya Red Cross, Mr. Speaker, and the government and compensation. No one is doing follow-up. If we pass this law, my brothers, my colleagues, sisters and brothers on the floor of the House, we would have told Kenyans, and you know, Mr. Speaker, we are politicians. You go, well, yes, we passed. For example, my Talai people normally ask me that thing, what happened? You pass, how do you follow it is implemented? So to ensure, we also ensure we deliver. Because when you go back to Talai, Mr. Speaker, and tell them, I have given you land, and there's a reporting mechanism, they will appreciate the fact that the parliament is doing, Mr. Speaker. I can see my friends, yesterday the issue of CBC came, and I saw it was in headline in some of the newspapers. The headlines were like, stop CBC if you cannot fix it. So there was a resolution by National Assembly discussing CBC. Is there a mechanism of following up with government to ensure that the resolutions that were made by the National Assembly were followed, Mr. Speaker? So we must, in all essence, what we mean in upshot, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure there is reporting mechanisms in terms of it, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. Speaker, another point that I wanted to make is clause 23C, a responsible officer who fails to comply with section 23B commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of not exceeding 500,000 or imprisonment for a term not 6 months or to both. And that is important. So, for example, Mr. Speaker, if today I had Sex for Work that was broadcast by BBC, and it is another story in Kericho, where allegations are facing James Findlay and a number of multinational tea estates in Kericho County. And I think it is a rampant issue within estates across the country, including Nandi and Bomet, and even here in Mount Kenya, Mr. Speaker. The Committee of JLAC, again, because as human rights issue is sexual offense and sexual violence, can order that the DPP prosecutes the alleged perpetrators of sex for work in that issue of Kericho James Findlay, Mr. Speaker. But the question is, how will JLAC and Parliament track that those alleged individuals and perpetrators are taken to face the full force of the law? It is hard because we don't have a reporting mechanisms. We don't have an obligation. And if today you order DPP, and you know, I normally see people are alleging that DPP is leaving individuals who are alleged of corruption, and my brothers in Azimio and Kenya lands normally allude to that fact. The Constitution is very clear. In as much as the DPP on its own motion can start investigations, Mr. Speaker, it does not take the power of Parliament, because it says Parliament can summon or invite anyone, Mr. Speaker. If today we direct DPP as a Parliament or as a Senate to arrest perpetrators of sex for work in the alleged scandal of James Findlay, and where women have been affected by that issue, Mr. Speaker, if the DPP declines to follow the order, what happens? The law is very clear. He is taking personal responsibility of that officer. And even when you see at powers and privileges, Mr. Speaker, when we summon a witness, like I'm not saying Senator Amida is a witness, but if our witness fails to show up, the law provides that we fine from their own money 500,000 or under punitive. And in fact, it's specific that the IG must look for that witness and bring that witness before the House, Mr. Speaker. So what we are just saying, Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, is that we are now neat. We want neatness. We don't want when we go to wananchi, we tell them, hiyo kitu tulipitisha bunge tu. So, Mr. Speaker, so I think this is important, but now I will be, when we will discuss with the mover of the motion, Senator Mungatana, we increase. Because you cannot, you know, Mr. Speaker, you cannot fine a CS 500,000. That's like chicken change, Mr. Speaker. We need to make it punitive, even up to 5 million. We need to enhance, even up to 3 years, and even include another punitive that if you fail, Mr. Speaker, if you are a CS, for example, we pass a vote of no confidence. The motion is brought. This should form part of the serious, because this is, you are defying the House, Mr. Speaker. And the status of the House of Parliament is the High Court. You are defying an order of the court, Mr. Speaker. And you and me know the consequences of defying a court order, Mr. Speaker. So we must be very punitive. If, for example, the clerk, being Jenga here, today processes and takes, for example, to a National Land Commission, and the chairperson of the National Commission ignores, we must make it painful and punitive to be deterrent to officers who do not follow the orders of Parliament, which has the same status, Mr. Speaker. I'm not saying Jenga is a clerk, but he's a clerk at the table office because we have our substantive clerk. I'm saving him the trouble, Mr. Speaker, so that people might not misinterpret. But maybe he will grow old enough to become one. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that we enhance. Finally, Mr. Speaker, So we need to enhance the money and ensure that exceed 6 months, for example, Mr. Speaker, at least we enhance. And then finally, where a response is sought on the implementation of more than one resolution, the relevant speaker might direct that the responsible officer submits a single report on the status of implementation of those resolutions. And that means just progress report. And you remember the president also had an obligation of tabling some of the reports before the House during SONA or State of the Nation address. Therefore, this part does not limit the power of Parliament to require information from, in accordance with the Constitution or any other law. So in as much as we are asking DPP to prosecute perpetrators of extrajudicial killings, it does not limit our power to go and demand more information from him or any other law, because we have been given, and as Article 117 of the Constitution is very crystal clear that the powers that we are trying to ensure we put in order. And Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, this is a 2010 Constitution. The Constitution keeps growing. It keeps improving. There are many course decisions that will always affect the way we implement our Constitution, Mr. Speaker, and ensure we come up with legislative and policy intervention at any given point, Mr. Speaker. So going into the future, Mr. Speaker, I want to call upon our colleagues to support this bill, Mr. Speaker. This is a very straightforward bill. In fact, it's very straightforward. It's just more of a procedural bill. I hope our brothers and sisters in the National Assembly will not be in any way introduce the issue of money bill. And I remember we went to Supreme Court on the issue of money bill. I don't see anything why the National Assembly should delay our bill. And in fact, in my proposal, Mr. Speaker, when we appeared before Milimani High Court, before Justice Weldon Korir, during my tenure, when I used to serve in your chair, one of the things we sought was signing of a concurrent certificate by all speakers, the Speaker of the Senate and the Speaker of the National Assembly. You know, Senate is the upper house. I hope everybody is aware of that. So we need them to sign a concurrent certificate to show that the bill has been passed by both houses. And by the way, in future, Mr. Speaker, and you sit in Senate Business Committee, you should even request the President that when they are sending to any bill of Parliament, it should be attached with a concurrent certificate from both houses, so that we run away from the ugly scenes that we saw in the last session, where we are saying we have passed the bill, National Assembly have passed alone, and they have taken for assent without the concurrence of both houses, Mr. Speaker. So I hope our colleagues in the National Assembly are watching this, and they should be ready, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, I heard a lot. I would have even submitted for the next 3 hours. But because I appreciate that most of my colleagues want to give their unique input, I wish to second and say that I'm happy to see this bill into full fruition and the benefits of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Congratulate on my brother. I think so that, Mr. Speaker, you know, hunting down a crocodile is illegal in Kenya under KWS. So the only gift I look for him is maybe a cow, Mr. Speaker, because that's respect in our culture. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Senator Danson Mungatana.
Thank you very much, Senator Cherargei, for seconding this motion. And honorable senators, I now propose the question that the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2022, be now read a second time. I call upon, I've seen the Honorable Senator from Nyeri, Honorable Wamatinga Wahome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want also to start by saying that I like to support and congratulations, Senator Mgatana, for that timely bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, optimization of processes, optimization and evaluation of processes are only possible if a feedback mechanism is created. For any efficient system to run, Mr. Speaker, it is important to set a 360 degrees feedback mechanism. As it has been ably prosecuted before this House, there comes a time when one feels like most of the resolutions, the bills, and things that are passed in this House, there is no laid down mechanism to have a follow-up on where they are, at what stage, and to know exactly what may be transpired and prevented them from happening. Therefore, putting in place a mechanism that will ensure that the work done in this House, the resolutions passed, the bills passed, we have a way to follow up and to know who is to give us the feedback, or to know which office to follow up with will be very, very important. I therefore think that the bill that Honorable Senator Mgatana has presented in this House is going to cure that gap, is going to seal that leakage, that we may discuss things here. Resolutions have been passed, and Senator Shelekai has mentioned about the Mau Mau. It was passed and agreed, but there is no mechanism to fall back what transpired. If we only debate, pass, and we do not have any mechanism which sets time frame and even says who shall do what in what time frame, then most of the work that we'll be doing here will end up being wastage of taxpayers' money, which will mean that we will be turning around in circles without moving forward. And as has been stated, the Constitution of Kenya, promulgated in 2010, it is not static. The laws that have been passed so far, they are not static. Today's situation requires that we move with speed, because we are living in changing times where we need to look at things the way they are and to address them. And we need, most importantly, to have a mechanism that will be feeding back so that we know the stopgap measures that need to be put in place, including bills and laws that need to be amended. I therefore think that it is very, very important that we support this bill, that we pass it, so that we'll create an avenue, an infrastructure that will enable a reporting back mechanism that will enable us to continue with our work, including modifying, implementing where we need to, so that we can move this country forward. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'd like to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wamatinga. Honorable Senator Wakoli Wafula.
Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa nafasi hii ningependa kuunga mkono na kushukuru yale ambayo wakili Senator Mgatana amewasilisha, na kwamba nimeona ni kama mazoea viongozi wa Afrika kuwa na ugumu wa kutekeleza majukumu yao pasipo shinikizo za kisheria, na zaidi ya hapo kupewa adhabu kali. Tumekuwa katika kamati mbalimbali ambazo kwazo tumeona kaunti zinakosa kujukumika kulipa mishahara, kulipa kodi, kulipa halmashauri za afya, kulipa watendakazi ama wanakandarasi, na haya yote yataweza tu kupata matibabu iwapo sheria ambayo ndugu yangu seneta analeta itaweza kufanya kazi. Pale ambapo iwapo kaunti imepewa pesa za mishahara, yule anayejukumika kulipa mishahara anapokosa kulipa ushuru, lazima apate kichapo cha mbwa mdomo juu. Pale ambapo wanakandarasi wamepewa kazi ya kufanya kwa mujibu wa miaka ama muda fulani, wakose kufanya na wapate pesa, sheria iwepo vile vile wao pia wajukumike, kwa sababu wamepunja pesa ya mtozaji ushuru. Kwa hayo mengi, ningependa kuunga mkono hoja ya wakili Senator Mgatana, na vile vile kabla sijasahau, katika majukumu ya serikali kulikuwa na 30% ya vijana kupata kandarasi, wanawake walemavu. Ukichunguza katika kaunti na hivi katika serikali, hayo yote yamesaulika kwa sababu yale mapendekezo ambayo yako katika vitabu vya serikali ni kama hekaya za bunwasi. Lakini wapo sheria kama hii itapitishwa na tupitishe katika kamati zetu na katika bunge la Senate, wale ambao wanahusika wasipofanya hivyo vile vile watapata adhabu kali, na wawe mfano kwa wengine ambayo hudhani kwamba uongozi ni wa milele. Lazima wajue kwamba uongozi ni kama mapito na ni muhimu kutenda wema na kwenda zetu. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator. I must confess that Kiswahili chako ni sanifu. And I think the House will learn a lot by your contributions on that particular language of Kiswahili. Honorable Senator Mandago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support a bill by Senator Mungatana. Mr. Speaker, this bill will cure the inefficiencies and effectiveness that I've witnessed in the resolutions that have been made by the House, Mr. Speaker, and there is no follow-up action from the executive or the concerned officers, Mr. Speaker. Considering the number of government institutions that we have to engage as a House, Mr. Speaker, and considering, Mr. Speaker, for example, the President, the number of ministries, semi-autonomous government agencies that it needs to supervise, Mr. Speaker, I think this bill, Mr. Speaker, will not only help this House to ensure that the resolutions are followed up with action, Mr. Speaker, but it will also help the executive in the execution of their plans, because civil servants, heads of government institutions, will have no place to hide because the law will catch up with them, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I therefore want to congratulate the Senator for Tana River, Senator Mungatana, for bringing up this bill. Mr. Speaker, from my experience in my previous service, county assemblies would also pass motions. They would come to your desk. You would mark to relevant officers for execution. But because of the exigencies of work, you might not be in a position to remember all motions that have been passed and moved for action, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, some decisions, some actions that ought to have been taken would lapse without your knowledge, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill will not only cure that, and I hope, Mr. Speaker, we shall also find a way of making sure that the same is replicated in counties so that also heads of departments in counties can be taken to account whenever resolutions of motions of county assemblies are also not followed up with the requisite action, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill will not only restate the position of this House in terms of decision-making in the country, Mr. Speaker, and the trust Kenyans have given to this House, but it will also make government services, emergency responses required, Mr. Speaker, get the due attention that is required by the respective departments, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I therefore support this bill and will, as a colleague, want to assure Senator Mungatana that we shall make sure that this bill goes through, and we would want to see the results in terms of increase in efficiency in service delivery in government within the period that the bill will have been passed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Jackson Mandago. And as I call upon the mover to reply, I must, for the benefit of the Right Honorable Senator Mungatana, indicate that when this bill was brought before our committee, which I chair, it made the members appreciate the bill and the desire to ensure that there is a follow-up on the resolutions of this House, on the decisions of the committees and of the House, in terms of ensuring that there is a mechanism within which implementation can be enforced. And secondly, the unique feature of punishing the authority or the person in office or a chairperson of an entity. That is one of the reasons why the committee agreed that we must define who is the person in authority, such that if for summons which has been issued and there is non-compliance, we know the target person to go for, and the punitive provision in terms of the inability to comply or to enforce the decisions of this committee. So even from the chair, I must say it is the right thing that the Honorable Senator Mungatana has done, and I now call upon you, Senator Mungatana, to reply. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all my colleagues who have made contributions to this bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to start with you and let you know that before you took the stage, the chair, when I was moving this bill for second reading, I did acknowledge the industry and the work that the JLAC did. And I did mention you in name, Mr. Speaker. And I read your report, and I was grateful for the work that you have done. Mr. Speaker, being an old member, I appreciate really the work that other colleagues are putting towards success of legislation. And I did mention that, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments from the report of legal. And I want to thank you very much, now in person, the JLAC, for the way you handled this matter when it was being processed through your committee. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank Senator Cherargei for passionately seconding the second reading of this bill. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Cherargei actually gave live examples, and we all remember what happened in Solai Dam. Many people felt that justice was not carried, and yet the committee of this House had made certain directions. There was previous, before the passing of this bill, no responsible officer, nobody to push, nobody was facing any consequences for not following what the Senate committee had resolved. The Honorable Cherargei, Mr. Speaker, spoke about what they had resolved as Senate on the question of the Talai, which continues to hound us to date. And he says when he goes to his constituency, they are asking him, what happened? He says, we passed, but there is no action as the people had said. With the passing of this bill, Mr. Speaker, this is going to be a thing of the past. I want to thank Senator Wamatinga. When he was contributing, Mr. Speaker, he made it clear that we need a 360-degree reporting mechanism so that when we come here and we debate on issues, we are not debating for the sake of debate. We are not here a house of talk. Mr. Speaker, we are passing resolutions that are going to be binding, and government officers are going to take us seriously. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the Honorable Amatinga's observations and his support. I thank the Honorable Senator Wafula. Mr. Speaker, he stated that in this country, not just Kenya, but in Africa, people have a problem with following rules and regulations. And it is important for us to put consequences. Mr. Speaker, it was not lost to me that this bill, in the second reading, there has been a proposal that we make the consequences of failure to comply with resolutions even more stricter than what we have proposed in this bill. Mr. Speaker, we have proposed 500,000 as a punishment. In the alternative, we have proposed a 6 months jail term for those responsible officers who will not have obeyed the resolutions of this House or given them effect. Mr. Speaker, it has been proposed in this House that we should go as far as 3 years. We should go as far as 3 million. Because they say a cabinet secretary, a CS, if you charge them with, find them guilty and say it is 500,000, it was stated here in the second reading debate that is change, a small change for them, and they may not take it as seriously. Those observations, Mr. Speaker, I will take them, and Mr. Speaker, during the third reading, we shall make appropriate amendments that I believe will have the support of the House. I want to thank the Honorable Senator Mandago. Mr. Speaker, in his contributions, he made a very important contribution on this floor. And he said that in his previous service, people used to bring very important resolutions in the county assembly where he was had the chance to serve as chief executive. And these resolutions, as governor, they are taken to, marked to the relevant departments. And yet those departments do not affect the resolutions of the people, the county assembly members who have been elected to pass a resolution to reflect what the people are saying on the ground. Mr. Speaker, he has said that we find a way in which this bill can also have effect in the county assembly. Mr. Speaker, I am grateful for that suggestion, and Mr. Speaker, we will find a way in the third reading to bring appropriate amendments that if the JLAC committee sees them proper, we shall process them, Mr. Speaker, on third reading to see how we can capture whether we can make it also effective throughout the Republic in all county assemblies, so that the resolutions of those members of the county assembly, Mr. Speaker, can be taken seriously. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have bad experiences. We have governors who don't even really respect our MCS, and when they make resolutions, when they talk the language of the people, these governors, they tend to hide and try to find a way to get away from the resolutions of the county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, we have had resolutions in county assemblies where a county assembly sits down and decides to pass a resolution to remove a county executive committee member. And then that member is supposed to be sacked, but instead, if he was serving in health, he's taken to public service. The governor decides he's not going to sack that member for whatever reason. He removes him or her from the docket that is currently serving and takes them to another place, therefore defeating the purpose for which the county assembly has taken time to express the opinion of the county at the assembly, of the people of that county. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for this proposal, and we shall surely find a way in which we can bring it in the third stage, the third reading, to see how we will be able to bring that decision, that thought it captured within the law. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say, as I finish in making my response, that, Mr. Speaker, this is not a small matter. It's going to affect all of us, and I am grateful for what my colleagues have said. And I know some members of the National Assembly are also listening and following into this. I take the comments by the Honorable Senator Cherargei that they should also support, when it comes to their side, concurrence, so that we don't have an issue, because this affects all of us. This is something that needs to be looked as a parliament issue, as an issue that affects all of us, and it is creating space for us as a parliament. Mr. Speaker, it is also not lost to me that the people of Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, they have had a problem. Those who are down at the area of the Delta, those who are down where the river Tana meets the sea. Mr. Speaker, they have had a problem because we have had upstream developments that have continuously reduced the volume that goes down to the river. Mr. Speaker, I brought a motion here, and the House agreed with me because they saw the suffering of the people at the Delta. And Mr. Speaker, that motion is so critical because what has happened is even areas like Matomba area, the river, because of reduced power, it has cut away. It has now turned to go into other areas. And then whole villages, people, 10,000 households, Mr. Speaker, the river has turned away because upstream, the developments have affected the strength and the power. And we pay twice. When it's the dry season, the river moves away. So people have a serious water problem. When it's rainy season, they release the water upstream, and it comes and it destroys us downstream. Mr. Speaker, that motion is so critical to our people. And yet, when the clerk has written to these people in the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation, Mr. Speaker, they have not really come back to the committee of, in charge of water, land resources to tell them, this is what we are doing. This is what we are doing. We are telling all our officers that no approval of any project shall be done without consultation and doing proper assessment, impact assessment, both social impact assessment, economic assessment, and even environmental assessment, not just in the areas where they're trying to dam or do something like that, but also downstream. What is the social impact, socio-economic impact assessment? And even for those that have taken place, what is the current situation? Mr. Speaker, you will find that as of this time, the ministry just received the letter from the clerk and they kept quiet. So, Mr. Speaker, we will then be forced on a situation that if it develops, that new upstream activities start and we are not told, what we will need to do is go to court. Why? Because this law was not in place at the time that we passed that motion. But Mr. Speaker, just like when the Honorable Cherargei was saying, Solai Dam, it was not possible to do anything at that point other than make resolutions. So, Mr. Speaker, with this law, we are saying for prosperity, for posterity, when things like this are passed in this House, responsible officers, we don't just say Ministry of Water, the way the letter has been written, the Ministry of Water, the Department of whatever irrigation, you need to do this and that, but there's no responsible officer being named. In this bill, going forward, all resolutions of this House, Mr. Speaker, there will be a requirement on the clerk now to identify the responsible officer, direct him to do what is required by that motion and the resolution of that House. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy that we have had this general consensus. It's been bipartisan, and those who understand what we are doing today, Mr. Speaker, they will be here, I pray, during the third reading and make their contribution. Mr. Speaker, I beg that the bill be moved to read a second reading. But, Mr. Speaker, I have an application to make that pursuant to Standing Order 66, Sub-Rule 3, I request that you defer the putting of the question to a later date, possibly, Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, because the resolution of this House is required. For the more than at least something like 2/3 of the delegations are required. So, Mr. Speaker, I would request that you accede to that humble request we are making, and I thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Mungatana. Indeed, you have made your application, and under Standing Order 66.3, the chair has got the discretion on application by a member to defer division to a future date. And even as I make the determination that the matter affects counties and that voting will be by delegation, we will defer the division until the next sitting of this House, that is in Tuesday, when we shall put the question and we shall take the vote. Next order.
Order number 11, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2022, second reading.
Mr. Speaker, I'm the mover of that bill, and I would request the Honorable Mr. Speaker to push it for Tuesday. I underestimated the strength that and the energy that I was going to require for us to move it. So, Mr. Speaker, I request that it be deferred to Tuesday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That is also noted, Senator Mugatana. We shall defer that particular bill until next sitting of the House, that is Tuesday next week. Honorable Mugatana, the next order again is still your bill, and we do not want to presume that you will also be making a similar application, but if you are, let the chair know about it so that we are appropriately advised.
Mr. Speaker, I will also be making the similar application, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Mugatana, your application is equally noted. The next, I'm noting that Senator Oruoba is not in the House. Next order.
Order number 13, motion, provision of free sanitary towels to end period poverty.
Senator Roba is not in the House, and we shall defer this motion to the next sitting. Next order. What's your point of order, Senator from Kiambu?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising to seek your indulgence and guidance on the motion that has just been mentioned about ending period poverty in this country. Mr. Speaker, I remember how that motion started. There was drama in this Senate. There was a bit of activism that emanated from that so that we can push that motion. Mr. Speaker, this is, I think, the 4th time that motion is being deferred. I seek your guidance, what should be done, Mr. Speaker, because we don't want to take this House for granted, that you can use this Senate for your own advancement, Mr. Speaker, but when it comes to dealing with real issues, real matters, such as this motion, the move of the motion is nowhere to be seen, Mr. Speaker. We have been taken into circles when that activism happened in this Senate, Mr. Speaker. I would like to urge this House that whenever you bring a motion, see to it that it has been discussed in this House and use the right channels, Mr. Speaker, because I have been here wanting to comment and contribute on the motion. Every time I come here, Mr. Speaker, because I want the period poverty to be eradicated in this country. But every time I come here, the mover of the motion is nowhere to be seen. How long are we going to defer this motion?
yet our girls are in problems at schools, Mr. Speaker. When are we going to discuss this important issue? I seek your guidance. If probably the owner or the mover of this motion is not willing to move it, I'm willing, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Karungwa Thangwa, it is noted, of course, remember we previously had a discussion on motions which are placed before the order paper and the movers are unavailable in the House. Part of a resolution made was to defer not to the immediate next sitting, because they will definitely take the place of other order papers which ought to be placed in the order paper, but we push it further. But in this particular case where you are saying you really would want to do it, I would love that we encourage the mover so that if it's placed in the next order paper, it be debated. But for the instance now, in her absence, we are going to defer it to the next sitting, and appropriate advisory will be given to the mover of the motion. Can we move to the next order?
Order number 14, motion, institution of measures to curb incessant high electricity costs in Kenya.
This is also a motion by the Honorable Senator Mohamed Chute. Are you ready to, Senator?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I think we don't have much time now. I can defer it for the next session. Thank you.
This motion is also deferred to the next sitting of the House. Next order.
Order number 15, motion, enhancing highway safety and convenience.
The Honorable Omatinga was here, but he seems also to have stepped out. We shall also defer the motion to the next session. Next order. Honorable Senators, there being no other business on the order paper, the Senate stands adjourned until Tuesday, 28th of February, 2023 at 2:30 p.m.